President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. You see Nancy Pelosi right there has just gavelled in. We're going to take a listen.
Throughout the Capitol, please rise for a moment of silence in honor and remembrance of the dedication and service of the fallen United States Capitol Police officers Brian D. Sicknick and Howard Liebengood.
If you're just joining us, we have a moment of silence right now that was just ordered by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, in honor of the fallen U.S. Capitol officers Brian Sicknick and Howard Liebengood.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess for a period less than 15 minutes.
Okay, so they started, and now a recess is expected for 15 minutes. But just to recap, that they are now considering asking the Vice President to invoke the 25th Amendment. That amendment is, of course, only to be used if it is determined that the President has become unable to carry out the duties of his job. The Vice President would then become the acting president. The more likely scenario is impeachment, which is expected to get underway tomorrow. President Trump would be the first president in American history to be impeached twice. The president, though, remains defiant. In an appearance at the border wall today, he said that the 25th Amendment is of zero risk to me, but will come back to haunt Biden and his administration. He called the impeachment a hoax. And once again, he took no responsibility for his role in the violence that took place at the Capitol on the 6th last week. Just today, the president doubled down, saying that his speech just moments before those riots was totally appropriate. And reminder that just before that violent outbreak, he told the crowd, "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength." We are joined now tonight by my colleague, Kira Phillips, in Washington, D.C. And Kira, what are you hearing tonight about some key members of his own party as we're now on the eve of the possibility of impeachment, including some breaking news from Congresswoman Liz Cheney?
I'll tell you, so much has happened today, Lindsay. I mean, just thinking about what's going on right now and the past 4 years and where we are, and President Trump, the President of the United States, here before us with very few allies. He has lost his social media access. He doesn't have his Twitter, which has been his voice for 4 years. And now there's this impeachment effort underway, the second time. In addition to that, as we are watching also what's happening on the floor, talking about invoking the 25th Amendment, I mean, did we ever expect that we would be here tonight talking about this with only a little bit of a week ahead left in his presidency? I mean, it's historic, it's remarkable, it's really amazing to watch, and I think it's also a very sad time in America right now. So to answer a couple of your questions, those were my immediate thoughts. The breaking news with regard to Liz Cheney, really no surprise. A Republican who's been pretty critical of the president, especially recently. She was even apparently had a private call. Sources had said that she was telling fellow GOP members that when it came to impeachment, to vote your conscience. Well, apparently she has now come forward late this afternoon saying she will vote to impeach. She went further in the statement saying never been a greater betrayal. There's never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States. And she, of course, is referring to the violence that took place, that violent mob, Lindsay, that we saw just terrorize the Capitol and all law enforcement within that building. And so, you know, we're at a time where his own party is turning against him. Some of his closest allies, Lindsey Graham last week even came forward. He's been very close to the president. His golfing partner, someone that he's listened to and trusted, he even said, Lindsey, I'm out. He can't take it anymore. So, and then you throw in all the impact economically and financially, and the banks that are pulling away from Trump, and the PGA pulling the big championship out of his golf course. I mean, so much is happening right now politically politically and financially for this president, and yet he acts like everything's okay, that his speech was okay, that his words were not dangerous. When he spoke to reporters today for the first time, Lindsay, we had not heard from him since the violence on the Hill, and he says that people listened to his speech and he did nothing wrong. My question is, who is they? and where does he get the power to say something like that in a time where people have died, and so many people on the political aisle are coming forward saying that our democracy is just totally been put at risk. And so here we stand now, waiting to see what happens with regard to the 25th Amendment and tomorrow morning impeachment.
Right, and you use the word sad to describe this moment. I would also add scary. You know, many people are talking about how when we heard from the president at the border wall today that he really kind of added gasoline to the fire, if you will, because he talked about how being silenced on social media and everything, that's only going to anger and outrage his supporters, and how kind of being very ominous about all of these things, the impeachment, and how that's only going to cause people to be more enraged, and really talking about the Biden administration, what might happen, how this 25th Amendment is going to come back to haunt them. And so I think that a lot of people in this country are feeling fearful in addition to feeling sad. I just want to go a little further about that statement that Liz Cheney released, because she really puts the blame squarely at the feet of the president, saying, the President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. None of this would have happened without the President. The President could have immediately and forcefully intervened to stop the violence. He did not. You know, also, you see Liz Cheney right there, and of course she had already told people to vote their conscience, and many are suggesting that this is really giving those who were feeling conflicted in the Republican Party about potentially impeaching the president, that this is perhaps really a nod to them to say, look, we're on the same page.
And you talk about the danger factor. I agree with you. I actually listened to the press conference that was held today with the acting U.S. attorney and also the representative from the FBI about the ongoing investigations, hundreds of cases before them, possibly even more. They say they're just getting started looking and tracking down those that were a part of that violent mob. But here's what really concerned me. They were asked twice, Lindsay, about, did you have knowledge that this was going to happen? Were you prepared in any way, shape, or form that this attack was going to happen at the Capitol? And I can tell you, Lindsay, from doing so many stories and documentaries on these type of underground chats and websites, where the type of individuals that we saw on Capitol Hill galvanize and they support each other and they inspire each other and they listen to the rhetoric and they respond in dangerous ways. You tend to wonder what was going on, who fell asleep at the wheel, because we have experts, we have analysts within the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security that are supposed to track these types of conversations and the planning that takes place, and so much of it happens on social media. And so to not have an answer today to how this could happen, why was everybody, it appeared they were caught off guard by this, and in the end, 5 people have died, and hundreds of people are on the loose, not being held accountable. So sad and dangerous are two very good ways to describe what we're witnessing right now, Lindsay, just in our country and in this moment.
And Kira, more from you in a moment. I think we're going to be buckling up for potentially a long night ahead, as you just saw a few moments ago that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, did gavel in, but then took a 15-minute recess. So we're going to take a break as well and be right back once the House reconvenes.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source, ABC News. Breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime. Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
People want to know who killed Jonbenet Ramsey.
Our grandfather was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation.
He just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. He had every person of interest in a spreadsheet.
A confidential list.
The
list.
And that list.
The list of suspects narrows.
We will find this killer.
Now, new details, new reporting, and the one family searching for a killer. The List, Who Killed Jonbenet, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
What kind of music do you want to make, Miss Franklin?
I want to make hits. I'm moving things forward for myself.
Dragging you down. You need me, Ree?
Hell, I do.
Go get your respect.
Welcome back, everyone, to GMA3. Last week's deadly insurrection has launched this country into unprecedented territory.
Yeah, now in a historic move, congressional Democrats have once again introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump. So let's bring in now to talk about this a rising star in the Democratic Party, as he's been called. Please welcome the 6'8", tattooed, F-bomb dropping, tweeting, master's degree from Harvard holding, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. It's good to see you, and I introduce you that way for a reason, because people point out, okay, he's different, he looks different, he sounds different, he's idealist, he's a socialist, he's this and he's that. You say you stand out simply because you tell the truth. It's that simple. So you tell me the truth as you see it about how your party, the Democrats, are handling and should handle this last week plus of the Trump presidency.
I think my party is speaking the truth. I mean, I've been saying now since the election, Pennsylvania was in the crosshairs from the election day on. And these lies, I mean, these, thousands and thousands of lies have accrued to the point where, it just combusted in D.C. last Wednesday. And we had a national tragedy that could have been even much more severe. And the Democratic Party is approaching it the right way. I mean, why have impeachment on the books if this isn't the circumstances in which it is used? I can't envision a scenario more fitting for impeachment.
Lieutenant Governor, at that very rally last week in D.C. was a Republican Pennsylvania state senator. It is important to note that he has denied entering the Capitol or participating in any violence, and he has denounced that violence, and yet still there are calls from Democrats that he resign. Where do you stand on that?
I'm calling on his caucus to enforce this idea of how can you have a member of your caucus be participating in this in any way, shape, or form. I leave it to their caucus because they understand what happened. We could have had the same thing happen in Harrisburg that Tuesday when everything sparked off in our Senate chambers. I had 200 Trump protesters underneath my office balcony protesting. And it could have gone another way in Harrisburg just as easily as it did in D.C. We have to, if you can't hold your own ranks and account, I don't know what's left.
Lieutenant Governor, you're telling kind of a story there some of our viewers might not be familiar with, but you all were trying to certify there in your state, and Republicans essentially, there was one contested race, so they essentially held it up and would not allow that person to be sworn in of your party, and it became a bit of a raucous there. So you saw what happened in D.C. Maybe everybody's not paying attention to politics there in Pennsylvania, but you actually feel that some of the tension and the tone that we witnessed in D.C. is playing out in other states, and including yours, that same vitriol?
100%, 100%. The protesters, the protesters were yelling, insults at me from the rally, and it could have very easily gone differently in Harrisburg on Tuesday, without a doubt. And I want to be clear, I was voted out of the chamber simply because I insisted that a duly democratically elected member of the Senate that was affirmed by the Supreme Court just be allowed to take his seat. And that was what caused all the chaos in our chamber. And then again, outside, we had a protest with hundreds of angry Trump supporters, all repeating the same lies that the president and other Republicans had said over and over again. And let me be clear, our election was free, secure, and true. And that's something that everyone knows to be true, even from the president on down. And that's what makes all of these outrageous lies, that much more just un-American and seditious.
Lieutenant Governor, quickly, I know you are considering a run for Senate in 2022. You tried it back in 2016. You didn't make it past the primary. This time around, though, it might be a little different. People know your name. When are you going to make that decision, and how are you going to make that decision?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be even in that conversation, and I suspect we're going to have a decision in the next several weeks. And the outpouring has been overwhelming. We raised now close to $600,000 in just 4 days, and over 16,000 grassroots donors, and just it's been extraordinary. And all I can say is, just overwhelmed with gratitude, and we'll be making a decision in the upcoming weeks.
Feel free to let us know first. Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me on.
All right, well, up next right here on GMA3, you're going to meet the restaurant owner going mobile in the pandemic.
Yeah, his taco truck idea not only keeping his business going, but also feeding thousands and thousands of hungry school kids as well. We'll be right back.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, with America's most watched newscast. #1 in late night versus the competition. The #1 news magazine on Friday nights. #1 in politics across this historic election versus the competition. The #1 daytime talk show. And #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys. So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Breaking news, context, analysis.
With today's extraordinary news cycle.
Now is the perfect time for ABC News Live.
A streaming news game changer. The time is now for ABC News Live. Get it, streaming everywhere.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
We're back now on GMA3 with the restaurant-owning dad in Maryland taking his taco act out on the road in the pandemic and helping hungry families too. Take a look.
So what made me start Little Minor is I'm a chef by trade. I've always been in restaurants and I always enjoyed tacos. It's one of my favorite foods. I believe they pack a lot of punch. The coronavirus pandemic has impacted my business greatly. There's always obstacles in a small business, and the coronavirus has actually made it obviously more difficult, but it's also forced us to adapt and change and really revisit how we want to do business and the best way to be able to reach our customers as well.
And we thought it would be a good idea to get a truck and put the restaurant on wheels and go to them to show them we appreciate their support.
They come here once a week and they switch up the menu. They offer different things that are really cool and modern and exciting.
My inspiration behind feeding kids for free came from when I realized I was picking up my kids from school when they shut school down, and I realized that a lot of kids, they go to school and they depend on that meal they get at school for, like, sometimes it's free, and they depend on that to eat. And I was thinking about that, and I just really realized that there was an opportunity there to be able to help a lot of people in a genuine way. And we didn't really do it to be recognized. We just did it to help our community. I look at the community that we're in as just like our family. We've served over 75,000 kids meals so far during the pandemic since March. The kids' favorite meals that they order are the quesadillas by far. We serve a lot of those. We've served actually homeless youth shelters during the pandemic in Columbia Heights, Northwest Washington, D.C. We were feeding the kids 5 days a week for free.
They were missing an essential meal every day. Mackenzie's actually, he's a part of my nonprofit. So we partner up on a lot of projects. And I just want to thank Mackenzie because it started with the idea of just helping these kids during the pandemic. He said, we're just going to keep this thing going.
The most rewarding part of the initiative of feeding kids for free is just, I think just doing anything genuine from your heart is rewarding in itself. And to me, honestly, that is the most rewarding part.
Wow, what an awesome guy. I love what he's doing.
And I am
You're
wanting a
hungry.
taco right now.
All he's thinking about is food right now.
Right. Well, stay with us here, folks. Coming up on GMA3, Dr. Ashton is here with the answers to some of your questions that you've been sending in to us, of course.
That's right. Plus, the barber shops and beauty salons doing a lot more than just hair, leading health education efforts to help their communities, especially when it comes to COVID-19. We'll be right back.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
Neighborhoods are underwater.
24/7 streaming news source, ABC News.
Here goes.
Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to the most compelling live video.
That's a grenade.
Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
Go there now.
Put this fire out right
with
now.
ABC News Live. Think of it as your live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw,
Welcome
live.
to the Columbus Zoo.
No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it.
That's frightening.
And go go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it, live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime, streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
Welcome back to GMA3 and what you need to know. A lot of news today. We've all been focused on the vaccine rollout. Dr. Jen, I have to say, I believe that you, ahead of HHS Secretary Azar, said that we should be doing all the things that now he's saying we should do to reach a larger group of people.
You're very kind. We do have a lot of great viewers who are watching this show. Hopefully some people heard them. But listen, I don't think there's one size fits all in terms of the approach to solve this problem. But we got the science part. We got the manufacturing part. We got the distribution part. He said today, HHS Secretary Azar said over 25 million doses have been distributed. Just over 9 million have been given. That's a problem. So now we need to operationalize the system. And one of the things that he was saying is he has 3 new steps. Yes, you are right.
They aren't new on this show.
We did discuss them over a week ago. One of them was to start vaccinating to kind of blend those groups. So 65 years of age and older, or any adult with a pre-existing medical condition, so that more people who want them can get them hopefully sooner instead of just waiting around. He also mentioned that they would be releasing all doses, not holding back that second dose, because there is confidence in the manufacturing part of this equation. And then, you know, increasing the channels of administration, using pharmacies, using clinics. You know, they should start running these 24 hours a day. We have experience with massive amounts of people on election day and sporting events. We need to recruit what we know from using that and get this vaccine into people's arms who want it and need it stat, to use a medical term.
All right, Secretary Azar. The first round of advice was free from Dr. Ashton. She's going to charge you for all the ideas from here on. Stay with us, folks. GMA3, we'll be right back.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what is it that you really need to know, want to know, to help you not just get through your day, but make the most of it? Feel smarter, feel better, feel happier. Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon? GMA3, what you need to know. It's all about you. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. This is going to be so good.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys. So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. we all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now, imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Beautiful. Welcome back to GMA3, What You Need to Know, a sign of the times. Yes, just look skyward for a little piece. That natural beauty, the aurora borealis, captured over Norway. Doesn't just make you want to breathe deeply. Yeah. Have you guys ever seen the Northern Lights?
I have not. Have you?
One time, yes. And I have it on my iPhone, actually.
Do you really?
Yeah, I'll show you in commercial break.
It's on my bucket list.
Did you put it on Instagram and I don't follow you, so I didn't see it?
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
How did you know?
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just kidding. Sorry.
One of these days, you will follow me.
Yes.
See what you're missing?
Yes, I'm missing a lot. Dr. Ashton, please, can we move on to our viewer questions? Let's go to question number one here. Is someone who is vaccinated safe to be around? Are you safe now, Doc?
Depends whose safety you're asking about, right? So first of all, let's talk about the person who's been vaccinated. This is not a live virus vaccine. It's not a weakened or attenuated virus vaccine. So unlike other vaccines, you can't actually get COVID from that person unless they've been exposed and infected with COVID-19 irregardless of the vaccine. Now, is it safe for the person? Not until you're at or after about 10 days post second dose. So again, we've talked about this before. It's not safe, yes or no. There's always a more complicated answer than that.
So
all right.
10 days, though.
10
You're
days.
bulletproof.
10 days post second dose, 95% covered,
Okay.
not 100.
All right.
All right, next question. What are some ways to improve the vaccine rollout?
Well, again, I think what's interesting about this is we have to look at where we have experience dealing with massive numbers of people, right? And then think about what can be extrapolated for this type of administration. So when you go into big sporting events, you two are big Southern Big Ten football, you know, they're packing.
SEC. It's called
okay,
SEC, Jen.
Sorry. I'm an ice hockey fan. You know, they're packing 100,000 fans into those football stadiums pre-COVID every weekend. If you can do that, if you can check tickets, if you can put people through a security detector, you can immunize people. And we need to start running these places 24 hours a day. It's not just nurses who can give these vaccines. There are plenty of people who work shift work as it is, but we need to start thinking creatively outside the box here about getting our numbers up and getting them up quickly.
All right. Well, you can continue to submit your questions to Dr. Jen on Instagram at Dr. J. Ashton.
All right, now to the growing efforts underway to bring truthful health information to the African American community, especially when it comes to COVID-19 and vaccines.
Yes, barber shops and beauty salons now helping to not only make people look good on the outside, but stay healthy on the inside. Our ABC's Kenneth Moulton has this story for us.
In the massive and historic effort to vaccinate a nation, doubt from so many Americans, especially in the black community.
There was a strong hesitance and reluctance in the African American community to take this vaccine. And it's not for anti-political reasons, but there's a historical foundation.
At Niles Style in Northeast Baltimore, it's no surprise that the barber shop has become the place to discuss COVID-19 and the vaccine.
We try to use our ability and our connection with our clientele to instill some confidence or some truth to a lot of the things that they may come in that they've heard off the street or off media.
In Silver Spring, Maryland, Millennium Salon also working to help clients stay safe and separate fact from fiction.
When it comes to the vaccine, do people who sit in your chair trust it?
I would say that 75% of the people who come into my chair are people who understand the value of the vaccine. And there are some things that they're just kind of waiting for to see happen first.
As lockdown restrictions started to ease, businesses across the beauty industry started to reopen and adapt with new safety measures.
I'm educating people as I'm educated, so there's a transfer of information back and forth.
Will you get the vaccine?
Absolutely. You see how quickly I said that? Because I believe it.
Not the case for licensed nail artist Jerry Taylor, who transformed her Southeast Washington, D.C. home to survive financially. The owner of She Nailed It says, like many of her clients, she won't be getting the vaccine.
I've only had one client actually say that she is interested in receiving the vaccine, but that was just more so, in her words, so that life can resume something back to normal. And she doesn't even know if that will work also, but for the most part, everyone's against the vaccine.
The history behind the skepticism, well documented.
I understand that people may have mistrust based on historical circumstances, the Tuskegee experiment, so on and so on. But I think it's extremely important that we, those of us who understand the science, communicate effectively with other people, given that we're at great risk from COVID.
COVID is disproportionately killing black people. For Niall Style back in Baltimore, that's where Live Chair Health comes in.
A client pulls out their smartphone, scans the QR code, and then there are 5 questions, 3 surrounding COVID.
Entrepreneur Andrew Suggs first created an app for booking barbershop appointments. Over time, his platform evolved to also help people become more health conscious for free, even equipping barbershops with blood pressure monitors.
Our focus is on addressing health disparities found amongst people of color, starting with African-American men and women first, because this population is overrepresented in almost every chronic disease category, and we need to go to where people are, which happens to be hair salons and barbershops in these communities.
Now, in the age of COVID, Live Chair Health is arming shops with thermometers for temperature checks, getting people information from medical partners, even connecting clients with insurance providers and doctors.
We really want to, be an advocate and tell people to mask up, social distance, frequent hand washing. But as far as taking the vaccine, we really want to put that in the hands of the primary care provider for that patient.
A recent Pew Research study finding only 4 out of 10 African Americans would get the vaccine. Live Chair Health also has what it calls a brain trust of black doctors, including Baltimore cardiologist Athol Morgan.
We have to really concentrate an effort to try to make more people more comfortable with the idea of taking the vaccine, which has been shown to be very effective and very safe.
For these barbers, fresh cuts aren't the only thing they're trying to provide their clients.
We're trying to make them look good inside and out.
Kenneth Moten, ABC News, Washington.
Look, that is just one of the spots I always remember as a kid going, where conversations happen among black folks, black men especially. You're sitting there, you have to undivided attention, right? You're sitting there, so you have to have a conversation. Even the kid sitting there can pick something up. So it's good to see they're concentrating on barbershop.
Tradition continues.
It does. It absolutely does. So thanks, Kenneth Moten, for that. And up next right here when we come back, getting it done in 2021, Robes. Getting that scale back on track with the author of Eat to Beat Disease.
That's right. And then the Little Family Show bringing big smiles. We're going to sit down with the 7 Little Johnstons. We'll be right back.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source, ABC News. Wow. Breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime. Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live.
What kind of music do you want to make, Miss Franklin?
I want to make hits.
moving things forward for myself.
He's dragging you down.
You need me, Ree?
Hell, I do. Go get your respect.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
And in a clinic.
Come on in, let me see.
The pets, they never did finick.
Hold your head up. Poor thing.
With the doctor's steady hand,
Brutus, that's it.
the patients felt grand.
She looks so much better.
His practice was no place for a cynic. No place for us. No place for a cynic. The Incredible Dr. Pol. New season tonight at 9 on Nat Geo Wild.
ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
Welcome back to GMA3. In 2020 certainly took a toll on a lot of folks, mentally, emotionally, physically, so no surprise there necessarily. That's one of the most popular New Year's resolutions is to get healthy.
That's right. So if you are looking to turn your health around in 2021, help boost your immune system, we have you covered right now. Joining us is physician, scientist, and New York Times best-selling author of Eat to Beat Disease, Dr. William Li. Dr. Li, as you know, 2020, a tough year. A lot of people have packed on some of those unwanted pounds, and I know that you are a big believer in not necessarily dieting, and people are always looking for that quick fix. You say it's how we reframe our thinking on nutrition and how we eat. So what do we need to know?
Well, if there's anything we learned from 2020, it's that we need to be able to rely on ourselves as much as our healthcare systems. And coming out of the pandemic, we learned that doctors and hospitals can't do everything for us. And sometimes there's not much they can do unless we're actually really sick. But we all practice healthcare every day in our homes, in our kitchens, using our own pharmacies. That's with an F, not a PH. Pharmacies in our kitchen, our fridge, our countertops, our pantries, using the food that's right in front of us. So we need to be able to make smart food choices, and that's at the center of taking back our lives and taking back our health.
That's right. So we all want to boost our immune system. Tell us how we do that with the food we eat.
Well, look, I've actually been researching more than 200 foods that can actually have benefit. Let's start with some great ones for immunity. Let's start with dark colored berries, some of my favorites, blueberries and blackberries. And that dark dye that makes it beautiful colored actually has been shown to boost our immunity. And researchers have shown you only have to eat about 2 cups of these berries a day to be able to get that type of benefit. Another one of my favorites is broccoli. And, you know, our moms all told us to eat our broccoli, the tops, the stems, even the sprouts, which have 100 times more benefit than actually the adult broccoli, the baby sprouts. And these actually can be eaten sauteed. You can actually put them in a shake. And researchers have actually found that if you actually have a broccoli sprout shake with a flu vaccine, you can actually amp up your body's beneficial response to the vaccine. Another one of my favorites is pomegranate juice, really sweet. So the good news is you only need to have about 8 ounces. That's 1 fluid cup. And it actually helps our gut secrete a healthy mucus that our gut microbiome, our good gut bacteria likes to make, that boosts our immunity. And then I love vitamin C foods. I recommend them to everybody because they boost immunity, but they lower inflammation, which is exactly what we actually want, that combination. What do you need? Like how much? Well, oranges are actually a great source of vitamin C. We all know that. About an orange and a half will actually get you kind of what you need to lower your inflammation. Strawberries, about 1 1/4 cup of strawberries will do it. Or if you want to switch it up, cherry tomatoes, guava, red bell peppers, grapefruit, all ways of getting good vitamin C. And then finally, one of my favorites are mushrooms. I like fresh mushrooms or dried mushrooms. Both actually have a soluble fiber that helps our immunity. And research have shown just eating about 1 1/4 cup a day can actually benefit that.
All right. Whoa, you're getting applause. You're getting applause.
Amen.
Over here. All right.
Amen. I I love it.
She's saying amen. She doesn't even say that on Faith Friday, Doctor, so you really got her here. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for the tips, and thank you for being with us. We'll see you again down the road, all right?
See you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lee. Up next, right here, when we come back, we're going to check on the Johnston family.
Yeah, all under one roof in the pandemic. The big stars of that hit show on TLC. They're joining us next. Stay here.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source, ABC News. Breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime. Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live, streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live.
What kind of music do you want to make, Miss Franklin?
I want to make hits. I'm moving things forward for myself.
He's dragging you down.
You need me, Ree?
Hell, I do. Go get your respect.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
Where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
And in a clinic.
Come on in, let me see.
The pets they never did finnick.
Hold your head up. Poor thing.
With the doctor's steady hand,
Brutus, that's it.
the patients felt grand.
She looks so much better.
His practice was no place for a cynic. No place for a No place for a cynic. The Incredible Dr. Pol. New season tonight at 9 on Nat Geo Wild.
ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward. The coronavirus. Everyone has concerns. And tomorrow, Dr. Jennifer Ashton is here, helping you better understand it all. Tomorrow.
On Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
All right, something now to make us all smile. TJ recently got a chance to catch up with TV family 7 Little Johnstons. Take a look.
Very soon, Emma and Alex will both be 15, and they are going to need to start studying for their permit so they can go and get their learners. Okay. We have gone through almost 3 older kids trying to get them driving.
Mac.
Oh, yep. So this go around with Emma and Alex, we thought we can get a vehicle that they can start practicing around the yard. So hopefully when it's time to get their butts in the seat of a car, it may be a little less stressful for Big Daddy over here.
You notice she's pointing to me and not her.
Why we got the go-kart.
I wonder if that works. The go-kart. That was a clip from the TLC show 7 Little Johnstons. The new season follows a family as they all try to navigate being back under the same roof during the pandemic. So let's bring in the stars of the show, Trenton, Amber Johnston, along with the kids. I got Jonah, Anna, Alex, Emma, and Elizabeth somewhere running around. She might jump back in there at some point. But let me just start with who I have here. And I have to ask about that clip. Does that work, learning to drive with the go-kart?
We're hoping it's going to work. So Alex and Emma are not quite driving. They're still studying for their learner's permit right now. But It's a good plan. My father did it for me, so hopefully it's going to work.
Okay, Amber, tell me, what is it like? You all have got 7 folks under the same roof, right, during the entire pandemic. What's that like?
Yes, we all have been under the same roof. Anna came home in March from college. It's definitely been trying at times, but we are trying really, really hard on a daily basis to keep the entertainment going, keep the work and school, and just keep everybody busy and focused so we're not squabbling with each other.
Squabbling. Now, part of that staying busy, you all have taken up, like a lot of people have, TikTok. Whose idea was this?
This was Emma's idea.
Wow. Okay. Emma decided to.
Emma,
so,
queen.
Is there a star among you on TikTok? Is that Emma as well, or just Emma's idea?
It's Emma.
So let's have a little bit of a challenge here for everybody. I'm going to ask the kids a few questions, and I want you to direct me to the parent that this applies to. So kids, are you ready here? Tell me, which parent is most likely to lose their keys? Wow. Oh, Dad, they got you pegged. Which parent, kids, is most likely to get a speeding ticket? Oh, my goodness, Dad, you are not doing well here. Which parent is most likely to tell you you're grounded? Okay. And who is most likely to give in and let you have your way?
That's Amber and I stick together when it comes to discipline. We support.
You all, last thing here, can you believe the journey? This is, I mean, how many seasons are you up to now here on the show? It's certainly been around since, what, 2015, I believe it is. Can you believe where you are, and can you believe that the audience has responded in such a way to seeing you and your family?
You know, it definitely has been a long journey, and it hasn't been an easy one for sure. But I think one of the biggest things when we went into the show was that we wanted something that our viewers would be able to relate to. They would be able to laugh, cry, and just simply enjoy with their families.
7 folks under one roof during the pandemic the whole time, and they're putting it out there for all to see. But yeah, 7 Little Johnsons airs Tuesdays on TLC.
All right, final thoughts now from Dr. Jen. All right, you guys, so we heard about eating well to beat disease. Yeah. Interesting new study about exercise. So many people trying to get into shape this year, and they're thinking that there's a certain number. While there are guidelines that we should try to hit in terms of just sheer time, recent study looked at over 90,000 people, had them wear trackable devices like Fitbit kind of thing, exactly, followed them for 7 days, and then assessed their cardiovascular risk factors, also risk for heart attack, stroke. This may not be a surprise to some people, but I found it encouraging that any bit of exercise is better than none. And the more you do, the more risk reduction you see in a linear relationship. So that means anyone, there is no such thing as nowhere to start. 1 minute is better than 0 minutes. 10 hours better than 1 hour, but little increments can really pay off in big dividends.
I love that. And so many of these online home membership gyms, you can do a 5-minute class, a 10-minute class.
Exactly.
You don't have to invest a full hour.
And it does add up, and it all matters. All right, I love that.
That's for you, TJ. That is what you need to know on this Tuesday. I'm Amy Robach. We're coming to you from our Times Square studios here in New York City. Join our conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And I'm TJ Holmes. That is Dr. Ashton. For all of us here at ABC News, have a good day and get moving. Just even for a minute. It's better than nothing.
See? He's learning.
I couldn't tell you, honey, I don't know where I'm going, but I've got to go.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, with America's most watched newscast. #1 in late night versus the competition. The #1 news magazine on Friday nights. #1 in politics across this historic election versus the competition. The #1 daytime talk show. And #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
People want to know who killed Jonbenet Ramsey.
Our grandfather was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation.
He just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. He had every person of interest in a spreadsheet.
A confidential list. The list.
And that list.
The list of suspects narrows.
We will find this killer.
Now, new details, new reporting, and the one family searching for a killer. The List, Who Killed Jonbenet, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
President Trump emerging for the first time since the Capitol attack, appearing at one of the most divisive places in America, the border wall. While back in Washington, more Republicans say they will vote to impeach the president. Breaking news, the House pushing ahead with impeachment, but first voting tonight to pressure Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment, as President Trump refuses to take responsibility nor express any regret over his mob of supporters carrying out a domestic terror attack, defending his speech beforehand where he told the crowd to go to the Capitol and fight like hell.
People thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
This as more Republicans speak out against the president's divisive rhetoric, his defiance and unwillingness to face reality, prompting a stunning announcement from all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff warning our armed forces against disrupting the constitutional process, reminding troops that President-elect Biden will be their next commander-in-chief. The investigation, what we're learning about the security failure at the Capitol, the FBI's warning of war one day before the siege. Although federal officials claimed there was no indication an attack was coming, authorities now on high alert across the country. Slow rollout frustration. The efforts now underway to speed up distribution of the COVID vaccines. Only 35% of available doses have been given out. We'll have the latest on the changing guidelines. And with the president's ego eclipsing the real issues people in this country are facing, tonight a closer look at the future of the healthcare system under a Biden administration. It's our America in transition. Social media steps in. Accused of letting their platforms run wild for years, tech companies are pulling the plug on President Trump and his extremist supporters' spread of false and dangerous misinformation.
The platforms have had no policy in place that really were ready for what was happening.
Are they ready for what's coming next? Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Some major developments coming in from Washington, D.C. tonight, where the number 3 Republican in the House has come out in favor of impeaching the president. Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney has released a statement saying there has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. The president does not agree. He was in Texas this afternoon and called the speech he gave before domestic terrorists and rioters stormed the Capitol totally appropriate. Tonight, a metal detector is now in place to scan each House member before they take the floor for the first in a series of votes that could lead to that historic second impeachment. And while not a single House Republican supported impeachment last year, tonight Liz Cheney is urging her colleagues to, quote, vote their conscience. Our Jonathan Carl leads us off.
In his first public appearance since his supporters attacked the Capitol building last week, President Trump barely addressed these horrific images. The seat of democracy desecrated, officers screaming for their lives. He showed no remorse either.
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
What Trump did today, blaming others for what he caused, is a pathological technique used by the worst of dictators.
But today, ABC News has learned Republican leader Kevin McCarthy told House Republicans that the president admitted to him that he might be, quote, a little bit responsible after he told his supporters to go to the Capitol.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Today, Democrats are trying to pass a resolution calling on Vice President Pence to evoke the 25th Amendment to remove Trump by declaring him mentally unfit.
This is not just a crisis and an emergency. It is a continuing crisis and emergency. It is not over yet. Can we say that we feel safe being in the hands of this president with the horror and the threats returning to the nation's capital?
House members spoke about the terror they experienced as Trump supporters marauded through the Capitol. Representative Norma Torres of California said she was trapped in the House gallery listening to gunfire. As she saw smoke from the tear gas rising, her son called her.
The call lasted 27 seconds. All I could say, sweetheart, I'm okay. I'm running for my life. And I hung up.
She pleaded for the vice president to help remove the president.
I urge Vice President Pence to do the right thing.
It's unlikely Pence will take the dramatic step of asking the Trump cabinet to declare the president unfit for office, but he hasn't said anything publicly to rule it out. ABC News asked the vice president's office again today. No answer. Trump and Pence met in the White House yesterday for 90 minutes, and today, Trump sounded confident.
The 25th Amendment is of zero risk to me.
If Pence doesn't act, Democrats plan to move tomorrow to impeach Trump, making him the first president in American history to be impeached twice. Today, the president ominously warned that would anger his supporters and would be, quote, very dangerous for the USA, especially at this very tender time. But Republican leaders in the House and Senate who have stood by Trump for 4 years are not trying to whip votes against impeachment and pressure lawmakers to support the president. House members are being told to vote their conscience. And tonight, the number 3 Republican in the House declared she is voting to impeach. Congresswoman Liz Cheney declared the President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled this mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. The President could have immediately and forcefully intervened to stop the violence. He did not. Cheney added, there has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. A source familiar with Kevin McCarthy's phone call with Trump Monday tells ABC News McCarthy told him it was time to call Joe Biden, adding, quote, the election is over and you lost. And in the Senate, Republican Rob Portman tonight urged the president to, quote, address the nation and explicitly urge his supporters to remain peaceful and refrain from violence.
Really some breathtaking developments happening there in the nation's capital, and Liz Cheney really putting the blame squarely at the feet of the president. Jonathan Karl joins us now from Washington. And back to more of that discussion. Number 3 Republican in the House, Liz Cheney, coming out in favor of impeachment. How big is the magnitude of this development ahead of the vote tomorrow? And you're learning also that Mitch McConnell may welcome impeachment as well.
This is a big deal. Liz Cheney is a conservative Republican. Nobody could call her anything but. She commands a lot of respect among Republicans, and her statement couldn't be more damning about the president's actions. I still believe it will be a relatively small group of Republicans that vote to impeach in the House, but it certainly could now be a dozen or more. And I think the bigger impact is on the Senate. The fact that one of the House leaders voted so profoundly to impeach Donald Trump, I think, is a green light to a lot of senators. I am told that Mitch McConnell welcomes the impeachment vote in the House and that he, too, believes that Donald Trump committed impeachable offenses, although he has not said if he'll vote to convict in a Senate trial. But I believe the odds are more likely now, tonight, that Donald Trump will not only be impeached in the House, but that he will be convicted by a 2/3 majority in the Senate.
Wow. And John, any indication from your sources that the president might listen to calls by Republicans to get him to tell his supporters to remain peaceful? What are your sources telling you tonight about the mood inside the White House?
Well, those pleas have come. They've come loud. They've come from Republicans on Capitol Hill who have gotten through to the president, who have gotten through to people close to the president. But, you know, what the president does at this point is quite clearly anybody's guess.
All right, Jonathan Karl, our thanks to you reporting in from the nation's capital tonight. And let's now bring in our senior Washington reporter, Devin Dwyer. Devin, the House set to begin debate tonight on a call for Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. Give us a sense of what we can expect tonight.
Hey, Lindsay. Well, this is the prelude to impeachment. It's happening right now at this hour on the House floor. Lawmakers, as you heard John report, they are debating this resolution. It's non-binding, largely symbolic, calling on Vice President Mike Pence to remove President Trump from power immediately. An extraordinary thing that we are witnessing at this hour, even if it is ultimately bindless. But essentially, the moment here is clearing the way for the big vote tomorrow, Lindsay, as you heard John talk about there. This is the only way Trump could truly be removed from office before Joe Biden is sworn in. It's likely to go down. We don't expect Mike Pence to invoke it, so tomorrow will set the stage for this impeachment.
Still lots of pressure for Mike Pence. Of course, he was there in the Capitol, in the room, felt the tension himself. If he does not act, which we don't expect him to, explain how this starts the clock now for Democrats to bring forward their impeachment resolution.
Well, they've already set it down in paper, Lindsay. I've got it right here. One article of impeachment, incitement of insurrection. It's ready to go. We already know the schedule for tomorrow. House Democrats will bring it to the floor in the morning. They will debate all day. And by tomorrow afternoon, we know, as John reported there are enough Democrats to impeach President Trump for the second time. The big question is how many Republicans are going to follow Liz Cheney's lead and impeach the president of their own party. We will see this extraordinary intra-party fight among Republicans spill out into view tomorrow. So far at this hour, Lindsay, there are 3 Republicans on the record ready to impeach. Lindsay?
Devin Dwyer, thanks so much. And now to the latest from law enforcement officials working around the clock to track down those responsible for storming the Capitol. And tonight we've learned of a chilling warning that was actually received the day before the riot. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has those details.
The warning was stark. Tonight, ABC News learning the day before the riots, the FBI's Norfolk, Virginia office sent out an internal bulletin raising the specter of growing calls for violence. One online thread stating, "Be ready to fight. Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in, and go there ready for war. We get our president or we die." FBI officials said today the intelligence was raw, did not name specific individuals, and was shared with officials in D.C. Sources saying the mob had leadership with communications equipment and military expertise.
We're looking at significant felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy. People are going to be shocked with some of the egregious contact that happened within the Capitol.
The FBI also releasing new images of the person suspected of planting those 2 pipe bombs, showing a distinctive backpack and shoes. And a new detail, the bombs were equipped with timers. Law enforcement chasing down more than 100,000 leads, simultaneously racing to disrupt any plans for violence on Inauguration Day. Capitol Police telling House Democrats overnight they're preparing for more than 10,000 armed Trump supporters to descend on the Capitol for the inauguration. Some reportedly planning to form perimeters around the Capitol complex, the White House, and the Supreme Court, blocking anyone who doesn't support Trump, perhaps assassinating them.
They have published rules of engagement, meaning when you shoot and when you don't.
Today, officials arresting 45-year-old Louis Capriotti of Chicago, who threatened to kill members of Congress. We will surround the blank White House. Concerned lawmakers suggesting all members of Congress go through metal detectors at the inauguration. Law enforcement in all 50 state capitals preparing for demonstrations.
If there's any type of disorder, we will have the reinforcements there.
As the FBI tracks down hundreds of rioters. Aaron Mostovsky, seen at the riot holding a Capitol Police officer's shield, is the son of a New York City judge. He was arrested this morning. Jake Angeli is now in an Arizona jail, facing multiple charges. His mother says he initially refused to eat after turning himself in this weekend.
He gets very sick if he doesn't eat organic food, literally will get physically sick.
And many people outraged by those requests for organic food. Pierre Thomas joins us now. Just stunning details on the ongoing threat, Pierre. What are federal and local officials in Washington doing now to prepare for the potential for more protests and violence in the Capitol? And will there be further security changes to plans for the inauguration next Wednesday?
Lindsay, it's an extraordinary situation. We learned today from sources that they expect up to 10,000 armed individuals perhaps to come in and around the inauguration. So law enforcement officials are building layers upon layers of additional security. You're going to have 15,000 National Guard. You're going to have thousands of federal and local police at the ready. This is the most serious situation I can recall in recent memory in regards to an inauguration.
Just astounding. Pierre Thomas, thanks so much. And at 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on ABC Newsline, be sure to watch the Hulu ABC News documentary, 24 Hours, Assault on the Capitol, the incredible and haunting images and reporting from a day we will never forget. The assault on the Capitol may also turn out to be a COVID super spreader event for some of those under siege inside. So far, 3 members of Congress have since tested positive for COVID-19 after sheltering in place with some of their colleagues who were not wearing masks and, when they were offered, refused. Here's ABC's Mary Bruce.
This moment, captured on video, shows the tensions as lawmakers huddled together in a secure location during the siege on the Capitol. And a Democrat trying to hand out masks, but these Republicans seemingly uninterested as they were trapped as the chaos unfolded. Tonight, concerns it is now causing a COVID spread. At least 3 members of Congress who were in the room have now tested positive. One of them, Brad Schneider of Illinois, ripping into his Republican colleagues for their, quote, selfishness and arrogance. He says he doesn't know where he contracted the virus, but that the exposure in that room was high.
There were a lot of people in a tight space. Even with masks, it was a risky environment.
Also testing positive, New Jersey Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, a 75-year-old cancer survivor, and Pramila Jayapal of Washington. Furious, Jayapal tweeting Republicans cruelly refused to wear a mask and recklessly mocked colleagues and staff who offered them one. Tonight, Democrats are fighting back, moving to impose a mask requirement on the House floor. Members who refuse could face up to $3,000 in fines.
So mask mandate could soon be underway there. Mary Bruce joins us now. Mary, we've also now heard from some of the Republicans in that room during the siege denying any blame at all.
Yet no surprise here, Lindsay. Republicans say they hold no responsibility for this. In fact, one member telling us, quote, it is absolutely ridiculous and insane to blame those of us who did not have COVID or symptoms. Of course, we know you can still transmit and spread coronavirus even if you are asymptomatic. And in fact, some of these Republicans are actually pointing a finger across the aisle at Democrats, saying Speaker Pelosi is at fault for bringing members back to the Capitol. Lindsay.
Okay. All right. Mary Bruce, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Mary there. And hospitals across the country in the meantime continue their battle against COVID, but also continue their cry for help as healthcare workers become more overwhelmed with the surge in patients. ABC's Kaylee Hartung brings us the latest on COVID's relentless surge.
Tonight, doctors bracing for what they're calling a perfect storm. Hospitals already pushed to the limit as the post-holiday surge worsens.
The number of patients admitted inside the hospital is at levels that most hospitals have not seen.
California topping 30,000 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. LA County alone approaching 1 million cases. Hospitals forced to turn ambulances away. Today, we saw it happen with the Long Beach Fire Department.
These are challenges that we have to deal with in the fire department to make sure that we can be responsive to the community.
And 1, 2, 3 hospitals later, you're just looking for the closest bed.
That's right.
It's a story repeated across the country and in record numbers. Close to 130,000 people now hospitalized with the virus. Doctors in Alabama calling the crisis frightening.
It's going to basically get to the point that elective, non-emergent procedures simply don't get done.
And new fears of a super spreader event in that state after this scene erupted. Fans, most without masks, packing the streets of Tuscaloosa to celebrate Alabama's national championship win. In Las Vegas, 9 members of the Sotatani family got infected. The father, Eric, didn't make it.
If you think you're untouchable, you're not. This disease does not discriminate. Trust me. Trust me. It affects the whole family.
And Lindsay, tonight the CDC is announcing it's requiring all passengers flying to the U.S. to now provide proof of a negative COVID test. If they don't, they will not be allowed to board that flight. And this news comes as we learn Maryland is now the 10th state in this country to identify that UK variant, the more highly contagious version of the virus. Lindsay.
Kaylee, our thanks to you. And turning to the urgent effort to speed up those vaccinations, of the 22 million doses distributed so far, only 9 million have actually made it into Americans' arms. Tonight, there's a major announcement from the federal government telling states to immediately vaccinate everyone over 65 years old, while there are loud complaints across the country about the difficulty of arranging for a shot. Our Eva Pilgrim has more.
Facing criticism for a sluggish vaccine rollout, the Trump administration now urging states to expand vaccination to include Americans over 65 and adults with pre-existing conditions.
Every vaccine dose that is sitting in a warehouse rather than going into an arm could mean one more life lost or one more hospital bed occupied.
The government will now release all vaccine doses instead of holding second doses back. Just 1/3 of 27 million doses distributed have gone into arms.
States are strapped for resources. I've heard from many health departments saying, I have personnel and I have resources to do testing or to do vaccination, but I cannot do both.
To boost the numbers, some states are opening mega vaccination sites with more planned, from a massive hub at Disneyland to New York's Citi Field, home of the Mets. Across the country, most vaccinations require an appointment, but getting one can be difficult.
5 hours plus yesterday, couldn't get through, really losing my mind trying to do this.
In New York, Ellen worked 2 phones and a computer before landing an appointment for her 78-year-old husband, Michael. In Florida, Liz Callahan says she has been trying to make an appointment for her 85-year-old mother-in-law for 3 weeks with no luck.
It says to keep hitting refresh. It said all the sites or all the slots for this week have gone. Try again next week.
Now, we are currently vaccinating about 700,000 people a day across the country. By one estimate, the American Hospital Association says we would need to do about 1.8 million vaccinations a day to get to widespread immunity by the end of May. Lindsay?
Eva, thank you. And when we come back, a major update in the trial against the officer accused of using his knee to snuff out the life of George Floyd, why he will no longer be tried with the other officers on scene. Creating trust for the COVID vaccine inside the barber shop. We'll explain. But up next, President Trump banned from Twitter and Parler, struggling to stay online, and many are now asking, has big tech gone too far, or did they make the right call after the riots? We take a closer look.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what is it that you really need to know, want to know, to help you not just get through your day, but make the most of it? Feel smarter, feel better, feel happier. Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon? GMA 3, what you need to know. It's all about you. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. This is going to be so good.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the high wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now, imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back. And now to the social media purge after the siege on Capitol Hill as the country now braces for potentially more violence ahead of the inauguration. President Trump today lashed out after he was banned from Twitter and Facebook, while another platform, Parler, was driven offline. Some say these moves are long overdue, but others are calling them an assault on free speech. ABC's Rebecca Jarvis has more.
Tonight, big tech continues its crackdown. Now nearly a week after rioters stormed the Capitol, new details about the central role social media played in the planning.
Well, I think we all were following the social media traffic. It's like you didn't need the CIA or the FBI to figure out that there were a lot of people that wanted to do a lot of bad things, and that the temperature has consistently been increased over the 4 years.
The FBI warning that armed protests are planned in all 50 states ahead of the inauguration.
I'm worried about these rumors of people gathering again in the Capitol and in our state capitals. We have got to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition.
Since last week's violent insurrection, President Trump has been silenced on most social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Today, the president railing against the censorship.
I think that big tech is doing a horrible thing for our country and to our country. And I believe it's going to be a catastrophic mistake for them.
And now the social media giants taking action against others, too.
We, again, took down QAnon, Proud Boys, Stop the Steal, anything that was talking about possible violence last week.
Twitter announcing it has purged more than 70,000 accounts for sharing what the company calls harmful QAnon-associated content, including messaging like Stop the Steal, writing in a statement that these accounts were primarily dedicated to the propagation of this conspiracy theory across the service. But some saying it's too little too late.
What happened on Capitol Hill was the result of years of indifference by social media companies to hate running rampant on their platforms, to divisive actors being allowed to manipulate people using lies, to great big lies like the election was stolen being pushed out to tens and hundreds of millions of people.
Last year, Twitter, a favored megaphone of the president, started slapping labels on select tweets, including ones that pushed unfounded claims about election fraud. But many have been calling on the tech titans to do more.
For one, the platforms have had no policy in place that really were ready for what was happening. And now we have this here in the United States, an attack on American democracy, and social media. It was absolutely playing a key role in all of this.
A 2019 study published by MIT finding false rumors spread faster and wider than true information. Going on to find falsehoods are 70% more likely to be retweeted on Twitter than the truth. Before this week, many conservatives were turning to social media alternatives like self-proclaimed free speech app Parler, the #1 downloaded app in Apple's App Store for a time.
You don't have to fear being censored. You don't have to fear who's looking at your profile and making judgments against you.
But over the weekend, Apple and Google pulled Parler from their apps. Apple saying the platform had not taken adequate measures to address the proliferation of these threats to people's safety.
Parler is likely a billion-dollar company. Poof, it's gone. But it's more than just the financial aspect to that. Republicans have no way to communicate.
Amazon Web Services, which hosted Parler, kicking the app off their services, a move that forced the site offline. Parler's CEO calling the move an attempt to completely remove free speech off the internet. But so far, First Amendment challenges against platforms like Twitter and Facebook have fallen flat.
So Twitter and Facebook are private companies. They can set the rules. The argument that this is somehow a violation of the First Amendment has been made and lost in court numerous times against these major social media platforms.
But the troubling question, have we given big tech too much control?
With that said, I think anyone should be concerned about the power that big tech has to prevent anyone from being involved in a megaphone as large as Twitter and Facebook. They have to use this power equally. They have to do it fairly.
For ABC News Live, Rebecca Jarvis.
Our thanks to Rebecca for that. And still ahead here on Prime, the deputy who found a driver trapped inside a burning car and took action with help of a Good Samaritan. With the pandemic raging, how will Biden administration tackle health care? It's our series, America in Transition. And how researchers say COVID has impacted the prevalence of other viruses. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. More than $1 billion up for grabs. The Mega Million jackpot is tonight. Powerball is tomorrow.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source, ABC News. Breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, nonstop, straight to you. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime. Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live, streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live.
People want to know who killed Jonbenet Ramsey.
My grandfather was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation.
He just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. He had every person of interest in a spreadsheet.
A confidential list. The list.
And that list.
The list of suspects narrows.
We will find this killer.
Now, new details, new reporting, and the one family searching for a killer. The List, Who Killed Jonbenet. Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
What kind of music do you want to make, Miss Franklin?
I want to make hits. I'm moving things forward for myself.
Dragging you down. You need me, Ree?
Hell I do. Go get your respect.
know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough. You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
Welcome back, everybody. We turn now to some rare good news on the medical front. A new study finding a record drop in cancer deaths. And perhaps it's not surprising, but the precautions that we're taking against the coronavirus, like social distancing and mask wearing, those are keeping other viruses at bay. We take a closer look by the numbers. 31%. That's how much of the rate of cancer deaths have actually decreased in the U.S. since 1991, according to a new report by the American Cancer Society. The rate fell a record 2.4% in just 1 year, from 2017 to 2018. Lung cancer accounted for almost 50% of the overall decline in cancer deaths, partly because fewer Americans smoke. But we've also seen improvements in surgery and radiation techniques, diagnostic tools, and also new drugs. And for entirely different reasons, Americans seem to be contracting fewer viral illnesses apart from the coronavirus. 0.3%. That was the rate of influenza A, the seasonal flu recorded by CDC labs in the last week of December. 16% was the rate just a year ago. Also a year ago, nearly 60% of samples taken from patients with flu-like symptoms tested positive for respiratory viruses and bacteria other than the coronavirus. Now it's only 18%, according to an analysis by the Washington Post. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The former governor of Michigan reportedly now faces charges over the water crisis in Flint. A major power broker in the Republican Party and casino magnate has died. We'll take a look at the impact of Sheldon Adelson. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
People want to know who killed Jonbenet Ramsey. Our grandfather was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation.
He just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. He had every person of interest in a spreadsheet.
A confidential list. The list.
And that list.
The list of suspects narrows.
We will find this killer.
Now, new details, new reporting, and the one family searching for a killer. The List, Who Killed Jonbenet, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
What kind of music do you want to make, Miss Franklin?
I want to make hits. I'm moving things forward for myself.
Dragging you down.
You need me, Ree?
Hell, I do. Go get your respect.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
6 days after the deadly assault on the Capitol, growing support among House Republicans tonight to impeach President Trump for the second time. Representative Liz Cheney, the third highest ranking GOP member in the House, saying in a statement she will vote to impeach Trump. Cheney writing, "There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States."
The big question is how many Republicans are going to follow Liz Cheney's lead. There are 3 Republicans on the record ready to impeach.
The House is expected to vote on impeachment as soon as tomorrow. The charge, inciting violence against the government of the United States. The president is still defiant, taking no responsibility for the insurrection.
People thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
Yet his actions that day have been widely criticized. House lawmakers are now debating a resolution calling on Vice President Mike Pence to strip Trump of his powers by invoking the 25th Amendment, which requires a majority of the cabinet.
I urge Vice President Pence to do the right thing.
The FBI is now raising the alarm about more threats, saying armed protests are being planned at all 50 state capitals leading up to Inauguration Day, January 20th. This as field agents comb through videos, images, and some 45,000 tips to try to track down thousands of the Capitol rioters.
We're looking at significant felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy.
In Minneapolis, orders filed in Hennepin County District Court show that Officer Derek Chauvin will be tried separately than the other 3 former officers accused in George Floyd's death. Chauvin is the cop who held his knee to Floyd's neck for nearly 10 minutes before he died.
The Flint water crisis not over. In fact, new charges are expected. The Associated Press reports that a new investigation targets former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, his health director, and other ex-officials. The lead-contaminated water left an indelible scar on the majority black city. That poisonous water blamed for a deadly outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in 2014 to 2015. Sources tell the AP the Attorney General's office has informed defense lawyers about indictments in Flint, so court appearances could be coming soon.
Passed out, foot on the gas. I'm gonna try to do a lockout.
Dramatic new video shows an officer rescue a woman from a burning car.
Hold on. Let me grab her arm. Get the seatbelt off.
The Ohio deputy says that he was checking on what he thought was an abandoned car when he noticed an unconscious woman inside. The woman was having a medical emergency and her foot was stuck on the gas. The officer got her out with the help of a Good Samaritan. The woman only suffered burns but was alert and taken to the hospital.
Billionaire casino mogul Sheldon Adelson has died. He was the head of Las Vegas Sands and passed away at the age of 87.
Adelson died of complications from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Asked at a conference what he hoped his legacy would be, Adelson, who was a power broker within the Republican Party, said he hoped it would be his impact on Israel. President Trump awarded him and his wife Miriam the Medal of Freedom in 2018.
Now, the SpaceX Dragon capsule is on its way back to Earth. It undocked from the International Space Station today and will splash down in the Gulf of Mexico tomorrow night. Now, the capsule is bringing back with it wine. See, a startup company from Luxembourg sent 12 bottles of Bordeaux wine up to space. It was left uncorked and aged for the last year in space. Now, it comes back to Earth, packaged in a steel cylinder to prevent breakage. It will be uncorked in February, and the company plans to test it to see how space has changed the wine.
Welcome back. And for more on the vote happening right now in the House and the impeachment vote tomorrow, let's bring in our political director, Rick Klein. Rick, we'll talk about tonight's vote in just a moment. But first, let's get your reaction to the news tonight that the number 3 Republican in the House, Liz Cheney, now has announced that she supports impeachment, and Mitch McConnell may also welcome a Senate trial as well.
Yeah, Lindsay, the Republican dam is breaking, and the statement from Liz Cheney is startling because she says directly that the president was responsible for bringing that mob together and giving that mob direction. She calls it the worst behavior ever, the biggest abdication of responsibility ever by a president. And the signals from Mitch McConnell, while he hasn't come out one way or the other on impeachment, having people signal on his behalf that he is open to impeachment is a big deal in terms of what it tells Republicans. Both of those developments are going going to free Republicans to vote for impeachment in the House and ultimately nudge them toward conviction and that 2/3 majority in the United States Senate. So these are big developments on the eve of the debate that's going on tonight and tomorrow.
If it becomes clear that the president could be not only impeached but convicted in the Senate, is there any chance at all that he might resign, like some Republicans like Lisa Murkowski have urged him to do?
Yeah, it's not from one of people calling on him to do it. I don't see it, Lindsay, and people around him insist that it's not going to happen. In the indignant tone that he took again today, insisting that there was nothing wrong with his comments. Everybody, he said, looked at it and it was fine. And then suggesting that the real danger would lie in divisions that would result from impeachment. That suggests that this is not on his mind at all. The president is not in a mood right now to back down. He's fuming over the events over the last week. But I think has enough people around him still telling him that he can cling on to power because the Senate is very unlikely to act fast enough to end his term early. Any kind of punishment would happen after he leaves office, which happens a week from tomorrow.
And now to tonight's vote on the 25th Amendment. It may not have any real impact, as it would not seem likely the vice president will take any action after this resolution passes. So why bother even doing this?
Yeah, the Democrats I've talked to cite two reasons. One is it's the fastest way to get him out of office if he doesn't resign, because impeachment does take a while. The 25th Amendment, with the vice president convening the cabinet, getting a vote of the cabinet, it could happen within a matter of hours if Pence wanted to do it. And the second reason I think that the Democrats want to pursue this avenue is they want to show that they did what they could, that they weren't pursuing something that was blatantly political in nature. They were trying to address the crisis at hand. They were trying to spotlight what the constitutional obligations are, and hoping that after Mike Pence stood up for the Constitution less than a week ago, just 6 short days ago, perhaps he would consider it again. Realistically, though, it was never going to happen. Mike Pence is loyal on this point if he was perceived as being disloyal somewhat to the president last week.
Finally, talk about the fine line that President-elect Biden must walk here, as he's called for unity since the day he was elected, but his own caucus now wants Republicans who supported the effort to overturn the election to face consequences.
Look, this is not the way that Joe Biden wanted to start his term in office. He's talking about having Congress essentially split its time between confirming his cabinet and beginning work on his agenda and continuing to pursue this impeachment in the Senate and conviction. But the pressure he's getting from the other side, frankly, from a lot of folks who just watched what happened. Keep in mind, these members of Congress who are voting tonight and tomorrow, they were witnesses to crimes. They feel it personally, urgently. Joe Biden, a creature of the Senate, saw the desecration of the Capitol and must have been incensed personally by it. So I don't know how it's avoidable. And you're going to see, once again, the long shadow of Donald Trump somewhere that is not welcome. Joe Biden does not want it to be the dominant issue of the early portion of his presidency. But right now, 8 days out, that seems unavoidable.
Yeah, President Trump still looms large. Rick Klein, our thanks to you. And as we've been reporting here, the pandemic has stretched our healthcare system really to a breaking point, and it's also compounding years of other problems, from skyrocketing costs to growing numbers of Americans who are uninsured. Tonight in our series, America in Transition, we take a closer look at President-elect Joe Biden's plan to try to stabilize the system and improve our care as soon as he's sworn in next week. Here's Devin Dwyer.
And this is what delivers the insulin.
As a type 1 diabetic, Amanda Bowen calls every day a reminder health insurance coverage for insulin is a matter of life or death.
Without that, I wouldn't be here today. There's no way I could afford it. There's no way.
When we first met last year, Amanda was backing Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders for president for his government-funded universal health care plan.
People have been struggling to get life-sustaining medications. It needs to be addressed.
9 months later, on the very day Joe Biden was declared winner of the 2020 election, Bowen's health care financial crisis took a turn. She was hit by a car while riding her bike, and just days after that, got hit with COVID-19.
The driver that hit me was uninsured, so that brings a whole other thing that I have to try to figure out financially.
Have you gotten a bill from the hospital?
I've gotten a bill from the ambulance. So it was $1,200 for the not even a mile-long drive to the hospital.
The divorced mother of two makes less than $1,300 a month as a freelance designer, qualifying for care under Medicaid. Now she hopes Biden will make expanding the program an early priority.
Income cannot limitate health care. And that's where I'm stuck now.
Millions of Americans are stuck in a health system in crisis. Preventive care and elective surgeries sidelined by COVID. Drug prices soaring, vaccination and testing programs faltering nationwide.
I'm absolutely convinced that in 100 days we can change the course of the disease and change life in America for the better.
President-elect Biden vows to distribute 100 million vaccine doses in 100 days, and he plans to move urgently to shore up the Affordable Care Act, now a critical lifeline for millions who lost employer-based health coverage in the recession.
This is the first recession where the ACA is in place as a safety net for people who find themselves unemployed and without health insurance. We've seen an increase in people coming to the ACA exchanges as they lose their jobs.
President Trump has spent 4 years undermining the law, even during the pandemic, and the U.S. Supreme Court is now weighing his request to strike it down entirely, a decision expected this spring.
I think the odds that they're going to strike it down are low. That's based on close analysis of the briefing in the case, the justices' past opinions, and what they said at oral argument. But a low chance is not a zero chance.
It was a decade ago that Biden famously heralded the Obamacare era. Now he's calling for a massive expansion of the law, more financial help for people buying plans on healthcare.gov, wider access to Medicaid, and creation of a so-called public option health plan that any American could buy into.
I would love to see a system, that is not tied to employer insurance.
Christine Callahan of Ohio, a political independent, says something has to change. Her 13-year-old son, Andrew, who has an undiagnosed genetic condition, requires $7,000 a month in medical care.
The Republicans in Congress said for years, we're going to have a better plan. We'll put a better plan in place when we're in power. And then they were in power, and they have done nothing to replace, to improve the ACA.
She says she believes a public option could be a big step forward.
I'd love to be in the days where I could raise chickens in my backyard and go to the doctor and exchange a chicken for our health care. We are so far past that there is no option to do this on your own unless you are, in that 1%.
A public option is interesting because that has definitely become the more moderate option within the Democratic Party. That does seem like it has a chance to pass the Senate. It's going to come down to some of these more moderate senators.
But first, sources close to Biden say the new president will use executive authority to roll back key parts of Trump's healthcare legacy, restoring protections for transgender people in healthcare, limiting exemptions for contraceptive coverage for women, and curbing waivers for states to impose work requirements on Medicaid recipients. None of the regulatory changes will be quick or easy, including a move to reverse Trump's effective ban on Title X taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood.
When you want to get rid of a rule, you've got to go through a pretty cumbersome, what they call it, notice and comment process. And that process will often take more than a year. So for the big ticket regulations, sometimes it's going to take a little bit of time.
The stakes for our health care are higher than ever, with deep political division in Washington hampering efforts to pass emergency COVID relief and new measures to reduce health care costs for consumers.
The unsolved problem in healthcare is the high cost, and particularly for middle-class people who are kind of caught in the middle between not qualifying for Medicaid but not having enough money to afford insurance. They really get squeezed by the high cost.
Amanda Bowen says despite it all, she's optimistic about the months ahead.
I think we'll see within the next year or so that we will have traction towards universal health care by starting with Medicaid expansion, making that available to the general public.
You think they'll actually be able to do it?
Whether or not they will, that's something else altogether, but they will have the ability to do this now.
Finding hope in a new, if narrow, Democratic majority in Washington, while Americans grapple with health care under pressure and for many, still out of reach. For ABC News Live, I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington.
Not going to let you sign off that fast. Glad to have you back on the show again, Devin. So there's so many issues that we've been discussing on the agenda for President-elect Biden, and that was even before this latest impeachment effort that could hang over the start of his administration. So how difficult is it going to be to prioritize action on health care reform early on?
Yeah, I mean, the to-do list really is getting crowded, Lindsay, and there's only so much bandwidth Congress can handle, the hearings and the like, of course, impeachment. Adding to that, I've talked to sources close to the Biden transition team discussions on this, and they say what the Biden people will do early on is tuck some of these health policy changes into a COVID-19 relief bill. That's something that has a lot of support. It's the first priority. One thing, though, Lindsay, a public option will most likely not be part of that. We're talking about some smaller things, maybe more subsidies for people to buy insurance on those marketplaces. So unlike 10 years ago when we saw that sweeping overhaul of Obamacare, in these early days of the Biden administration, any health reform changes that will likely come will be much smaller, incremental, and part of some other big, important bill like one dealing with COVID. Lindsay?
All right, Devin Dwyer, our thanks to you again, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline. Breaking news, context, analysis.
With today's extraordinary news cycle,
Now is the perfect time for ABC News Live.
A streaming news game changer. The time is now for ABC News Live. Get it streaming everywhere.
what kind of music do you want to make, Miss Franklin?
I want to make hits. I'm moving things forward for myself.
He's dragging you down. You need me, Ree?
Hell, I do. Go get your respect.
Thank you to the doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals,
and first responders.
Thank you to everyone keeping our supermarkets, pharmacies, gas stations running.
Thank you to all the essential workers for all that you do.
We thank you.
We thank you. We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all you do.
And with every challenge, question, concern, we'll be here for you every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Because we will
get through this together.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back. As we've discussed the development and rollout of the COVID vaccine, we've also mentioned the hesitations and fears, especially in communities of color. Medical experts have stressed the importance of local health officials and religious leaders in reassuring people that the vaccine is safe. But what about your local barber? Some going in for a haircut are coming out with an earful. ABC's Kenneth Moten gives us a look at the role of black barbershops serving as educational safe spaces.
In the massive and historic effort to vaccinate a nation, doubt from so many Americans, especially in the black community.
There was a strong hesitance and reluctance in the African American community to take this vaccine. And it's not for anti-political reasons, but there's a historical foundation.
At Niles Style in Northeast Baltimore, it's no surprise that the barber shop has become the place to discuss COVID-19 and the vaccine.
We try to use our ability and our connection with our clientele to instill some confidence or some truth to a lot of the things that they may come in that they've heard off the street or off media.
In Silver Spring, Maryland, Millennium Salon also working to help clients stay safe and separate fact from fiction. When it comes to the vaccine, do people who sit in your chair trust it?
I would say that 75% of the people who come into my chair are people who understand the value of the vaccine. And there are some things that they're just kind of waiting for to see happen first.
As lockdown restrictions started to ease, businesses across the beauty industry started to reopen and adapt with new safety measures.
I'm educating people as I'm educated, so there's a transfer of information back and forth.
Will you get the vaccine?
Absolutely. You see how quickly I said that? Because I believe it.
Not the case for licensed nail artist Jerry Taylor, who transformed her Southeast Washington, D.C. home to survive financially. The owner of She Nailed It says, like many of her clients, she won't be getting the vaccine.
I've only had one client actually say that she is interested in receiving the vaccine, but that was just more so, in her words, so that life can resume something back to normal. And she doesn't even know if that will work also, but for the most part, everyone's against the vaccine.
The history behind the skepticism, well documented.
I understand that people may have mistrust based on historical circumstances, the Tuskegee experiment, so on and so on. But I think it's extremely important that we, those of us who understand the science, communicate effectively with other people, given that we're at great risk from COVID.
COVID is disproportionately killing black people. For Niall Style back in Baltimore, that's where Live Chair Health comes in.
A client pulls out their smartphone, scans the QR code, and then there are 5 questions, 3 surrounding COVID.
Entrepreneur Andrew Suggs first created an app for booking barbershop appointments. Over time, his platform evolved to also help people become more health conscious for free, even equipping barbershops with blood pressure monitors.
Our focus is on addressing health disparities found amongst people of color, starting with African-American men and women first, because this population is overrepresented in almost every chronic disease category, and we need to go to where people are, which happens to be hair salons and barbershops in these communities.
Now, in the age of COVID, Live Chair Health is arming shops with thermometers for temperature checks, getting people information from medical partners, even connecting clients with insurance providers and doctors.
We really want to, be an advocate and tell people to mask up, social distance, frequent hand washing. But as far as taking the vaccine, we really want to put that in the hands of the primary care provider for that patient.
A recent Pew Research study finding only 4 out of 10 African Americans would get the vaccine. Live Chair Health also has what it calls a brain trust of black doctors, including Baltimore cardiologist Athol Morgan.
We have to really concentrate an effort to try to make more people more comfortable with the idea of taking the vaccine, which has been shown to be very effective and very safe.
For these barbers, fresh cuts aren't the only thing they're trying to provide their clients.
We're trying to make them look good inside and out.
Kenneth Moten, ABC News, Washington.
Our thanks to Kenneth for that. And before we go tonight, our image of the day. Democracy in action, even if it may eventually lead to the ouster of the commander-in-chief. Tonight, the House may vote to compel Vice President Pence to intervene and respond to that deadly riot on the Capitol. Tomorrow, they are set to make the historic decision to vote for the second impeachment of President Trump. And we will be there with you every step of the way. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming it with us. We'll be right back here at 9 o'clock.
The horror and chaos and the sadness over what has played out at our nation's capital. Images not seen in modern American history.
This was horrifying. Pure pandemonium. People scaling walls at the U.S. Capitol, breaking in literally. A noose had been erected on the mall, and the angle of the photograph in the noose was the dome of the Capitol.
Everybody stay down! Get down!
Unbelievable. Sickening.
We love you. You're very special.
It's certainly not the first time that we have heard the president not come out outright and condemn violence and condemn riots.
You'll see the white power movement on the march.
You will not replace
like a monster that went into hibernation, and this was evidence that the monster has come out.
The displays of racism and violence that we're seeing in the U.S. are certainly not new.
It's a cancer in the fabric of this country.
Part of this long legacy of people organizing over time. Within the white power movement, the Oklahoma City bombing stands as the culmination of decades of organizing.
Timothy McVeigh has been found guilty on all 11 counts.
He was trying to call people to arms and to provoke a race war.
Kids are fair game, women are fair game.
It's meant to be a battle strike. It's meant to incite war.
You wonder if the clues that were there had been unearthed, or whether things might be different.
We were not sufficiently prepared.
An act of domestic terrorism carried out by a movement that we have not classified, confronted, or understood.
Save the white race!
All we're doing is planting the seeds for future Timothy McVeighs to do the kinds of things we saw in Oklahoma City.
There are going to be more victims.
We have a problem in the country. It's getting worse.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
We just need to start talking about race. There's no shortcut around that.
To be honest, I have an awful lot of stuff going through my mind as I think about going up to this property. You know, my dad, he gave up everything to go out there, and I know he believed in what he was doing, and you know, he created this compound, but he was so misguided and so deluded. Here's this guy who was world-renowned physicist who renounces that career and then becomes one of the world's most prolific white supremacists.
I believe that revolutionary action is called for.
And it was his idea to create a whites-only enclave there and would start the eventual cleansing of America as he saw it.
Kelvin Pierce grew up with a front row seat to hate.
My father was Dr. William Luther Pierce.
A man considered among the nation's most dangerous white supremacists.
Many people call us racists, hate mongers.
It's about hatred. It's about racism. It's about exclusion.
One of the first and most famous leaders of the nation's modern white power movement, William Pierce was the founder of a far-reaching extremist group, the National Alliance.
What worries me a lot is the unchecked tide of non-white immigration into this country, both legal and illegal. That is what is really breeding disaster.
Especially active in the 80s and 90s, the National Alliance attempted to bring white power propaganda to the masses, secretly hoping their movement would appeal to a variety of actors.
So within the white power movement is a broad social movement that includes a lot of different actors on the far right. The white power movement has invested tremendous energy in hiding the fact that it is a social movement because it allows these activists to perpetuate more violence. This whole movement was about becoming an enemy of the nation, to unseat the federal government, create civil disturbance, and for many people it's imagined as a way to provoke race war.
Basically to create a whites-only homeland where only whites would live and exist with each other. And that was the goals of the National Alliance.
And the White Power Group came up with a new strategy to accomplish its goals.
Done by people in small organization cells who didn't make a big splash in the news all the time, like some of the Nazi groups, the Klan groups.
And everybody looked up to my dad. They revered him. They absolutely idolized him as their leader.
Kelvin Pierce is in West Virginia, trying to find the old compound that today is still owned by his father's group.
I guess I'm probably a little nervous. It's been almost 20 years since I've been there. I've only been there twice.
Kelvin's father moved to this secretive compound after rising to white supremacist infamy with his novel, The Turner Diaries.
And it's sort of like the Bible of the whole movement.
It truly is the most violent exercise of what it would take to create an all-white state, nation, and world.
To start this, in effect, almost a race war and bring down the federal government and establish a new form of government.
The FBI has labeled the Turner Diaries as a manual of hatred.
They were direct reflections of fantasies that he had about actions that he wished he could carry out himself. So when he saw an interracial couple, that would engender rage in him. His rage would lead him to want to kill those people, to murder them. And that's what happens in these books.
But the violent writing soon turned from William Pierce's fictional fantasies to real-life tragedy.
We got a lot of victims here at, what the hell is that, 6 and Rock, something like that?
We're talking about the largest deliberate mass casualty event in American history between the attack on Pearl Harbor and the attacks of 9/11.
You know, I knew immediately, oh my gosh.
You can never know how many people would have been saved if this had been seen as the threat that it was at the time.
We weren't ready for it. We were not sufficiently prepared.
This is a hard story to face.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters in New York. We interrupt briefly to tell you of a major explosion in Oklahoma City in a federal building in the center of Oklahoma City about 9 o'clock local time in Oklahoma.
We got a lot of children right over here at the YMCA also. We got this daycare here. We need to get in too.
I kept thinking, if he's in there, I need to find him. So I just tried to visualize the building back the way it was, you know, that I saw an hour before, and I closed my eyes and I remember going first floor, second floor, and remember where his bed, where his crib would be, and that's when I started trying to climb up the Rebel. And there was a man there, and he told me, you know, no, come down, ma'am, you can't go up there, it's too dangerous. No, come down, come down.
The baby she was desperately trying to find, her son, 16-month-old Tevin.
And then they brought out a baby, and he brought the baby over, you know, to me and laid him on the cement bench. And I recognized who the baby was. Then they brought out another baby, then they laid down another baby in a blanket, and then another baby, and then another baby.
Helena Garrett's son, who had been at the daycare center that day, was among those who did not survive.
It's just the most devastating. Everything fell on top of it. It's the most devastating thing I've ever seen in my life.
Was an attack on innocent children. We will find the people who did this. I ask all Americans tonight to pray.
I can tell you this: the FBI and the law enforcement community will pursue every lead.
The country was still reeling over the bombing at the World Trade Center just 2 years earlier by foreign terrorists.
All we know is that they are searching for two men described as Middle Eastern. They were last seen traveling in a late model brown Chevy pickup.
There have been some claims of responsibility in parts of the country. In one, somebody quoted the Nation of Islam, but again, we caution people to remember this kind of thing happens on these occasions.
Most people thought from the messaging we were getting that it had been done somehow by Muslims or Arabs or something.
The FBI has asked the U.S. military to provide up to 10 Arabic speakers to help in the investigation.
But as the investigation unfolded, the evidence pointed in a different direction entirely.
Early on in the investigation, there was a piece of the vehicle used in the attack that was quickly uncovered. And they found a VIN number, and they were able to trace that back to Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh, a 26-year-old man from upstate New York, was arrested within hours of the bombing.
In those days, for some people, they couldn't imagine that some nice, fresh-faced American had done something.
Yet McVeigh, a decorated Army sergeant, became the startling face behind America's deadliest domestic terrorist attack yet.
It was a shock to a lot of people that a former soldier was the person that had done this. When you looked at Timothy McVeigh, he looked like the boy next door.
Here he comes, Mr. McVeigh, Mr. McVeigh!
All of the discussions were about why did he do this? You know, where did he come from and who is he connected to?
And we can also give you a bit of a hint now as to where the government appears to be focusing its investigation on some of the what are called right-wing white supremacist groups in various parts of the country.
And inside McVeigh's yellow Mercury sedan, investigators discovered a sealed envelope containing evidence that would prove crucial to analyzing McVeigh's motivations.
Highlighted passages from the anti-government novel The Turner Diaries.
The white power fantasy novel written by William Pierce and long held sacred by the white power movement.
He usually had a copy wherever he went, and he oftentimes had extra copies that he would give to others.
And in rarely heard audio tapes obtained by ABC News, McVeigh, then behind bars, spoke himself about the importance of the book in his life.
I wanted to explore issues of fundamental rights. I had bought the Turner Diaries in bulk.
It just spelled out a lot of things. It had a lot of similarities to what happened in Oklahoma City.
There's a long passage in the Turner Diaries about a similar bombing that many people have thought is McVeigh based the Oklahoma City bombing on. The bomb is very similar. The civilian casualties are very similar.
But that's the value of such a book, okay? It plants seeds like that.
The Turner Diaries gave McVeigh not only a blueprint for action, but the location and identity of potential allies.
He was looking for places where he could possibly hide if he didn't get arrested shortly after the bombing.
Did you intentionally call the National Alliance in April 3 different times, leaving messages to talk to a representative? Why did you call?
The primary reason was to get in touch with the guy to see if they had any safe havens.
He'd actually reached out to the Turner Diaries author, Pierce, or his organization as a possible place, but they never got back to him.
William Pierce addressed the attack himself in an interview with 60 Minutes back in 1996.
When you learned that Timothy McVeigh was a devotee of the Turner Diaries, did you then say to yourself, hey, I wonder if I could have been responsible for some of that?
No, I never did.
Well, I knew that was typical Dad, because I knew that he absolutely would approve. And again, he would say that, you know, these are unfortunate results of what needs to happen for us to accomplish our goals.
Authorities never did tie the National Alliance to the Oklahoma City bombing, pinning the devastating crime on McVeigh and a few accomplices, including Terry Nichols and Michael Fortier. But it became clear that McVeigh's ties to white power groups ran deep.
They're brothers in arms, and that is, they're survivalists or quasi-survivalists, and I can get along with them real well.
It took me a while to accept that Tim had in fact joined the Ku Klux Klan. He tried to downplay that, but other comments showed that hostile attitude towards people of color.
You talk about the ideology of white supremacists, neo-Nazis, racists. The most extreme people want the revolution, and McVeigh wanted the revolution as well.
Within the white power movement, the Oklahoma City bombing stands as the culmination of decades of organizing.
This was the incident that these groups have been waiting for to start what they consider a war. They consider McVeigh a soldier in the war.
He was trying to call people to arms and to provoke a race war that would unseat the federal government and create an all-white ethno-state. It's meant to be a battle strike.
McVeigh engaged in lengthy preparations.
He subscribed to white power newspapers. He read up on other white power groups, including the Order.
The Order is militantly anti-government and anti-Semitic, and its members have been linked to armored car robberies in Seattle, Washington, and Ukiah, California.
The Order was a white terrorist group that was interested in perpetuating a war on the government and bringing about race war.
Situated just a few miles from suburban lawns, the Aryan Nations compound in Hayden Lake, Idaho, was once the epicenter of the white power movement.
They would light crosses and swastikas. It was the base of operations for groups like the Order that went out to carry out violent activism across the country.
And it was here, at a crucial meeting in 1983, where the white power movement declared war on the U.S. government and gave birth to its deadliest strategy yet: leaderless resistance.
Leaderless resistance, which is what we would now think of as cell-style terror. It's the idea that if one cell goes down, it doesn't take down the entire organization.
And McVeigh insisted he was the sole attacker in Oklahoma.
When McVeigh says he acts alone, what he is doing is attempting to obscure the movement that he has become a soldier for. And what that action does is obscure society's ability to see the broader movement and to reckon with it.
Baby killer! Baby killer! In the lead up to the Oklahoma City bombing, white power frustrations had reached a fever pitch, beginning with a 1992 mountaintop showdown that began over an illegal firearms investigation.
Randy Weaver has told friends all he wants is to be left alone. But with the sudden appearance of military hardware like this, his one-man stand against the law is suddenly taking on the appearance of a full-blown war.
At Ruby Ridge, federal sharpshooters opened fire on a family of white power activists.
The violent standoff resulted in the deaths of a U.S. Marshal, Randy Weaver's wife, and their 14-year-old son.
An 11-day siege leaves a mother and son dead, shot by federal agents.
A year later, federal agents tried to raid a cult compound outside Waco, Texas, in connection with an investigation into illegal guns.
4 agents with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency are dead, and 15 wounded in a shootout at the headquarters of the Branch Davidian sect.
It's believed about 70 people are still in the compound, including children. The Davidians are heavily armed. A former member of the sect says Vernon Howell, who calls himself David Karish, has their undying support.
After a 51-day standoff, federal agents eventually moved in with tanks to end the siege, culminating in a massive fire and the deaths of 76, including 25 children.
Someone back up now! No! We got a big fire here!
Just about everything that could have gone wrong in this bizarre tale has.
White supremacists and anti-government militias seized on the federal raid at the Branch Davidian compound at Waco as a rallying cry, even though the Davidians themselves were integrated and did not subscribe to a racist ideology.
Ruby Ridge and Waco, these are certainly not the first time that paramilitary policing was used on American civilians. But Ruby Ridge and Waco are important to this movement because it's the first time it impacts white people.
The deadly events at Waco took place precisely 2 years to the day before the Oklahoma City bombing.
Ruby Ridge and Waco were calls to arms for the white power movement.
McVeigh was among those who answered the call.
That was the final blow in his mind. And so he allowed himself to become convinced that the government was the enemy.
The rules of engagement, if not written down, are defined by the actions of an aggressor, okay? Now, what rules of engagement would you interpret in examining Ruby Ridge and Waco? Kids are fair game, women are fair game. See? Waco started this war. Hopefully Oklahoma would end it.
Timothy McVeigh was convicted of the Oklahoma City bombing and executed on June 11th, 2001.
It is absolutely sad and tragic that most of us knew very little about the development of the movement in which Timothy McVeigh was embedded. We didn't know how far the tentacles reached.
But it turns out there were warnings that something like this could happen.
6 months prior to the bombing in Oklahoma City, the Southern Poverty Law Center sent a letter to then Attorney General Janet Reno, and we talked about what we were seeing in terms of the threat from the anti-government movement. We just saw more and more of this kind of thing happening on the ground.
President, will this prompt the United States or the government to take a new and a tougher look at the white supremacist groups, the hate groups, the militias? Is this going to trigger any kind of crackdown?
Let me say that we need to finish this investigation now.
At the time, I don't really think that there was an understanding of how much of a threat we were dealing with within our own country.
And it has never been taken as seriously as it needs to be taken.
The working street agents of the FBI who were assigned to these types of cases understood the potential violence that these groups could engage in, and were very frustrated that their efforts to open investigations were often stifled at headquarters.
We had all of these internal controls that were being placed on our ability to really develop intelligence. So we backed away, and then we even backed away further.
And then something strange happened. The white power movement went seemingly quiet.
Initially, after the bombing, I think most of the groups kind of went underground as quietly as they could.
Clearly they didn't go away because they came back, but we didn't yet know how big of a problem it was.
Most of my experiences with my dad were pretty awful.
Today, Kelvin Pierce spends a lot of time at his own cabin in the woods, reflecting on his past.
When I was a freshman in high school, I remember seeing a lot of my classmates come to school wearing their football jerseys on game day. And I just wanted to do that so bad. I wanted to join that team. So I approached my mom and dad, and I couldn't even get halfway through my question before, no, you cannot do that. And I'm like, why? Because you'll have to shower with blacks. I will not allow that. And he didn't use the word blacks.
And at the hands of his father, Kelvin says he endured both emotional and physical abuse.
It was an electric razor cord, or a belt, or a 2x4, or he really liked to use a metal coat hanger. He would order me to remove all of my clothes, and then he would just proceed to wail away at me.
But for Kelvin Pierce, growing up the child of one of the nation's most infamous white supremacists was also quite complicated.
Even though I hated my dad and I was afraid of him, I pretty much believed what he taught me. I mean, I actually believed when I was a kid that black people were subhuman, that they weren't human beings.
To the white power movement, violence is a means to an end, something that Kelvin Pierce says was ingrained in his upbringing.
I remember fantasizing about going into Washington, D.C. and standing on a street corner holding a machine gun and mowing down black people with that machine gun, because then my dad would have been proud of me. And I would be taking my revenge out on the people who I felt were responsible for my dad being the way he was.
But as a college student at Virginia Tech, Kelvin began asking questions, and he started with his infamous father.
I did ask him point blank, Dad, why did you do this? And the only answer he could give me was, I did the only responsible thing I could do. So he didn't see it as a darkness. What he saw it was, in his mind, was a true threat to what he considered was his kind, his race.
That answer was not enough for Kelvin.
I learned that I did not need to attach myself and my self-worth to all of the fearful and hateful thoughts that were continually running through my mind, and that I had a different choice.
As the years went on, Kelvin fell out of touch with his father, who had left the family and moved permanently to his West Virginia compound. At the same time, across the country,
maximum violence upon them.
The white power movement, far from the spotlight of authorities, continued to add followers.
This is a convention of bigots. They call it the 1986 World Aryan Congress.
Mr. McVeigh! Mr. McVeigh!
The 90s was kind of a heyday with Timothy McVeigh and Ruby Ridge and the militias of the day. That was kind of the last time that we seemed to, as a country, really grapple with this right-wing extremism.
And as the years passed, officials would face another battle on the home front.
This is a difficult moment for America. Today, we've had a national tragedy.
There is chaos in New York at the moment. Both trade towers now, these 110-story high towers, have now been hit.
9/11 happened, and our focus shifted overseas.
We took our eyes off the ball in terms of the threat from domestic terrorism.
But while white power compounds across the country appeared nearly deserted, experts warn otherwise.
One shouldn't think that the movement is dead because the compound is empty, just that they have found other places from which to wage war.
Indeed, behind the scenes, white supremacist groups were actually organizing and gaining strength.
This movement opportunistically relocated to other places.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
By 2008, the election of America's first black president brought on a surge of white power activism.
I believe that there were so many people in our country that were so outraged by the fact that we had a black man as a president, and that it didn't fit their image of what a black man was.
White power activists spent the years after Obama's election connecting with a powerful tool, the internet.
These are activists who have been online since the early 1980s.
We've been on the internet for a long time, and from the very beginning, my idea has been that what we need to do is build a multimedia communications infrastructure.
But there really is an acceleration now, and there really is a capacity to recruit and radicalize people without ever meeting them in real life.
Police say Dylan Roof walked into that Charleston church with a premeditated plan to kill.
So the classic example there is Dylan Roof.
In 2015, Roof murdered 9 black parishioners in Charleston, South Carolina.
This morning, the 21-year-old who reportedly wanted to start a race war and is accused of murdering a black Bible group is facing the inside of a cold jail.
I had to do it because nobody else is going to do it. There's no skinheads left. There's no KKK.
Well, let me back up. Would you consider yourself a white supremacist?
I do consider myself a white supremacist, sure. White people are superior.
Dylan Roof seems not to have had much contact with other people in the movement in real life, but was radicalized online.
The reaction to Obama's presidency and what happened after that tells us that we're not post-racial and that many people did not appreciate the fact that he had got elected as president. So his election was not a symbol that we had solved the race problem.
I will do my best to bring people together, not pull them apart.
Honestly, places like Afghanistan are safer than some of our inner cities.
By the 2016 election cycle,
you are the most dangerous person to run for president in the modern history of America.
Crooked Hillary. She's crooked.
Animosity was at an all-time high.
We all became more aware of hate crimes, more aware of civil unrest during the campaign season, and it was difficult to put your finger on if this was a growing trend.
But then,
Charlottesville then happened in August of 2017. And for many of us, it was a huge wake-up moment.
Soil, blood and soil, blood.
Racist Nazis literally showed up. These people felt very comfortable being out in the open, in the light of day, to push their hatred.
You look at Charlottesville and see the white power movement on the march.
Like a monster that went into hibernation, and this was evidence that the monster has come out.
We were all shocked that something like this would happen in our country in 2017. This is not 1920. This is 2017.
Charlottesville was a pivotal moment for me because watching those people march and carrying those torches and singing the tune that they were singing, "You Will Not Replace Us," that immediately transported me back to my childhood and to my father and to everything that he believed in and everything that he was trying to accomplish.
When President Trump addressed Charlottesville, behind the scenes, counterterrorism officials were getting anxious.
We were just hoping that he wouldn't get in the way of it. Instead, we got even a worse scenario.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
The one thing the president could do is tell his, biggest supporters, tell them, don't take matters into your own hands. Do not be a vigilante. But he doesn't do that.
If there are people in leadership positions who try to motivate people through that hate, what we're doing is we're planting the seeds of homegrown violence within our own country.
After Charlottesville, the counterterrorism team at the Department of Homeland Security attempted to shift their focus to the threat posed by the white power movements by proposing increased data collection and upping the threat level designation.
Add it to the national security strategy, add it to the national counterterrorism strategy. We offered a number of ways in which to prioritize this, and we were rebuffed multiple times over the course of 2018.
In a statement to ABC News responding to these claims, the White House said, contrary to these meritless allegations, there is nothing more important to this president than protecting the U.S. from all threats, both foreign and domestic, and he has repeatedly taken strong actions to keep America safe. But Elizabeth Newman, who left her post and is now part of a group of former administration officials campaigning against President Trump, says the White House refused to tackle the issue head-on.
This president seemed to not want to hear that we have a problem with white supremacy in this country. And that lack of clarity of what the threat is coming from the top, I think has allowed it to spread and metastasize.
It's a cancer in the fabric of this country that every once in a while becomes more benign, but still remains a cancer.
A short time ago, we were dispatched to active gunfire at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill.
2018 and 2019 saw a historic increase in white power violence.
Breaking news, we are learning more about the synagogue massacre.
With the deadliest attacks against both Jewish and Latino communities in American history taking place. 11 people murdered at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Shoppers at the Cielo Vista Mall and Walmart running for their lives as those gunshots rang out.
And 23 gunned down at an El Paso Walmart.
Multiple fatalities.
Hate has no place in our country, and we're going to take care of it.
After El Paso happened, there was a lot of appropriate activity at the White House where they were examining what policy changes might need to occur.
If we are able to pass great legislation after all of these years, we will ensure that those who were attacked will not have died in vain.
With the White House now on board, Newman and her team revived their earlier plans to prioritize white power threats, now a #1 threat.
We've had more attacks, more deaths from right-wing extremist violence than from any other type of threat, including radical Islamist jihadism.
But along the way, she says she received an unusual request by the White House.
They directed me that your prevention plan is good, we want to support it. We can't talk about it in the framing of domestic terror. We need to talk about this in terms like violence prevention. The message was clear that we couldn't talk about domestic terrorism at the White House.
A joint session of Congress is convening today to certify the results of the presidential election. Tensions running hot.
Media will not show the magnitude of this crowd. We have hundreds of thousands of people here, and I just want them to be recognized by the fake news media. Turn your cameras,
for weeks, President Trump had been summoning people to Washington for the January 6th rally. He said, be wild, it's going to be wild.
You saw him address his supporters, making it clear that he will not concede.
There were lots of warning signs. Various groups, fringe groups, were talking about show up in Washington, make your voice known, don't let them steal the election.
Nobody knows what the hell is going on. There's never been anything like this. We will not let them silence your voices. We're not going to let it happen.
It started very much like a Trump rally. It started with the president's supporters gathered together. It has a lot of enthusiasm. So you felt that support. You felt the enthusiasm.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
But not too long after all of those people marched from the White House over to the United States Capitol, did things start to really take a turn. And when it did, it was absolute chaos. I remember looking up and seeing people scale the scaffolding, climbing the steps of the United States Capitol, and then moments later, people were bashing in windows, crawling through them. They stormed the Capitol from all sides.
Thousands storming the Capitol after a rally with President Trump, during which he urged them to march on the Capitol, where a joint session of Congress was debating and working to certify the election as our democracy dictates. Instead, they were halted by protesters who smashed through the doors, broke their way into the Capitol, making it to the Senate chamber, and throughout the Capitol, overwhelming police.
Unbelievable, sickening, catastrophic. Leaders of the free world hold up, scared for their life, wondering if someone's going to be able to break the door down. There were people who were carrying Confederate flags. There were people who had T-shirts on suggesting an affinity for Nazism. We saw people bring a noose, indicating that, they wanted to intimidate people of color.
A gallows that had been erected on the mall, and the angle of the photograph in the noose was the dome of the Capitol. And that's when you knew that these people were serious, despite all their ridiculous outfits and everything else, conspiracy theories, that there would be an attempted lynching of the democracy.
Racism. It's a symbol of racism. And to see that waltz through that Capitol was offensive beyond compare.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt.
Well, it's certainly not the first time that we have heard the president not come out outright and condemn violence and condemn riots. In Charlottesville, when you had white supremacists marching, engaging in violence, the president said there were very fine people on both sides. And when it was his own supporters that gathered in Washington, D.C. to stand by him, when it was rioters storming into the United States Capitol, he called them very special people. He told them that he loved them and politely asked them to go home.
We love you. You're very special.
He's the president of the United States. He called himself a law and order president. Laws were broken, people had been injured, the Capitol had literally been desecrated. That particular speech in that moment, that statement, will be analyzed, I believe, for many years to come.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
Sure,
Are you
I'm willing
prepared
to do
specifically
that,
do it?
Well,
Go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would you like me to condemn?
white supremacists and right
Proud Boys. stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what.
It was a moment unheard of in a presidential debate.
He not only did not condemn them, he didn't even criticize them.
He knows that his words matter, and he said that intentionally, and that should stoke fear in the hearts of not just Black Americans, but all Americans.
Trump 2020!
The nation's spotlight suddenly thrust upon the Proud Boys, an extremist far-right group founded in 2016. Its leaders describe themselves as a Western chauvinist organization, but experts we spoke with said they've made allies of white supremacists.
The Proud Boys are a neo-fascist group that believes society is stronger when it's male-dominated and based on Western cultural values. What makes them dangerous is their willingness to use violence to spread their ideological beliefs.
Even the Proud Boys founder seemed taken aback as his reaction was live-streamed during the debate. Just days before, the Proud Boys had gathered in Portland, Oregon, where the fractures in American culture were vividly displayed. As members of the Proud Boys and counter-protesters held opposing rallies.
One of the ways Proud Boys will communicate their ideology is by self-deploying to protests where they will engage in activities where they can claim they are providing security. Law enforcement organizations have no need for armed vigilantes, particularly those that are ideological extremists.
The presidential debate moment was not the first time President Trump has faced criticism for not denouncing white power groups.
It's somewhat mind-boggling because while his FBI and his Department of Homeland Security have warned of an increase in violence by white supremacists and far-right extremists, the president refuses to acknowledge that and instead talks about the violence perpetrated by left-wing groups.
It's an accusation the president has faced for years, again and again.
Are you concerned that you might be stoking more racial violence or more racial discord?
The president did address the issue the day after the presidential debate when pressed by ABC News' Kira Phillips.
Follow up. White supremacists, they clearly love you and support you. Do you welcome that?
I want law and order to be a very important part. It's a very important part of my campaign.
But do you denounce them? Do you denounce
I've always denounced any form
of white supremacy?
Any form of any of that, you have to denounce.
Can I follow up to that, Mr. President?
Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
Clearly, there is anger in our country. That's how Trump won in 2016, was recognizing that there was deep-seated discontent with the way things were. There was anger, and exploited it. And then worse, it became really clear that his rhetoric was inspiring violence.
An ABC News investigation found that since Donald Trump emerged as a presidential candidate in 2015, at least 20 people charged with hate-fueled assaults or threats cited Trump specifically in connection to their actions. We couldn't find any such cases tied to either President Bush or President Obama. At a gas station in Bellevue, Washington, a man accused of trying to run down two brothers with his truck and threatening to kill them for being Muslim.
I think I said, you know, please get out of my country because I don't like him here. And this is why I like Trump. And he's doing the same thing as I feel, wants him out of our country.
Hit me in my back of my head, bro. That's it. This is for Trump.
But even a president's rhetoric and a collection of cases citing him can't truly account for what's unfolding across America right now.
Racially motivated violent extremists over recent years have been responsible for the most lethal activity in the U.S.
And it turns out some of those violent extremists arrested by the FBI in recent years have been motivated by someone long out of public consciousness for most Americans, none other than Timothy McVeigh.
Deadly stabbing of two Good Samaritans who were
rampage on a Portland train. 35-year-old Jeremy Christian. Police say Christian stabbed and killed 23-year-old Talisha.
And a 21-year-old Brandon Russell in a room upstairs, weapons and a framed picture of Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh.
In 2018, Russell was sentenced to 5 years in prison for possession of an illegal device and storing explosives.
He had a portrait of Timothy McVeigh on his nightstand. The guy has become this hero in the anti-government movement.
Another case in 2017 targeting Oklahoma City once again, just 4 blocks from the site of the Murrah building bombing.
Drake Varnell intended to destroy a building with a large vehicle-borne IED similar to that of McVeigh.
23-year-old Jerry Varnell is behind bars, accused of plotting to blow up a bank in downtown Oklahoma City.
What was your reason? Why did you do it?
Repeatedly, Varnell referred back to McVeigh.
He specifically wanted a 1,000-pound ANFO device, which is the type of explosive McVeigh had used. McVeigh said the children that were killed in the Murrah building were collateral damage. Mr. Varnell made a comment that you have to break a few eggs if you're going to make an omelet. But we were able to, through the course of the undercover operation, take some measures to ensure the material he was dealing with was incapable of exploding.
Varnell assembled what he thought was a live bomb in a shipping container and under heavy surveillance from the FBI drove it to downtown Oklahoma City.
The van came from the north, turned right into the alleyway. Mr. Varnell was there for a very brief period of time, then left on foot, walked south to the getaway vehicle. The instructions on how this particular bomb would work, per his desire, would be dialing a telephone number into a cell phone, and he dialed that number 3 times to try to detonate the device.
Earlier this year, Jerry Varnell was tried and convicted in a courtroom right across the street from the site of the bombing 25 years earlier. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison.
It's a story of a whole web of people who are invested in that kind of violent action, who want events like this, who worship McVeigh as a saint, who take him as inspiration in the present.
For people who deal in hate, for people who deal in divisiveness, there is concern that the images that we saw unfold in the Capitol, no less, the seat of democracy, that there's a great fear that those people are animated by what they saw, happy about what they saw. They're happy about it because they want a civil war. That's one of the principal tenets of many of these groups. They want black and brown and white people to be at each other's throats, fighting in the streets. That's what they want. And there's a real concern going forward that there's someone out there who's going to be thoughtful, who's going to internalize all that hate and manifest itself in a way that will be horrific. And once one law enforcement source said, you fear that there's a Timothy McVeigh out there right now who saw all this, who's angry about the death of the woman, who's angry that the president that they somehow and for whatever reason identify with is going to leave office, that person is going to be thoughtful and will take their time and do something.
I do not think that we can afford to forget what Oklahoma City is all about, because it is a reality that we may very well have to confront again in this country.
The 1995 Oklahoma City bombing remains the deadliest homegrown terror attack in American history. But to look back at history is to see a long line of other racially motivated episodes well before it.
We've had racism around for a long time. We had it before Trump.
What seems new here is not new, but is part of this long legacy of activism, of people working and building and organizing over time.
That hate has always been there. The only difference now is that people feel like that their hate now is unassailable.
The blogs, the trolls, actions like Charlottesville, runs for office, posters on your campus, all of these are old strategies from the movement for public-facing recruitment efforts.
White revolution is the only solution.
At the same time, we can expect to also see a violent underground that is doing paramilitary training, acquisition of weapons, infrastructure target attacks.
Indeed, members of modern white power groups like the Atomwaffen, seen in this propaganda video, have been tied to at least 5 murders and multiple bomb plots in recent years and embrace tactics once honed by the Order and Timothy McVeigh.
The danger now is that so many people feel more comfortable speaking in racist terms who otherwise used to be under the rocks, in the crevices. But now they're out.
We're in a period that people are referring to as a racial reckoning. It began after the public lynching murder of George Floyd.
The death of Floyd and other unarmed black people at the hands of law enforcement continue to spark protests, marches, and calls for police reform in hundreds of cities across the country. In many cases, frustrations are being expressed loudly and peacefully. But in several cities, violence, looting, and destruction.
For that crowd of people who hate, seeing all these black and brown and white people out in the street protesting for racial justice, that is, for them, an opportunity. And you see bulletin after bulletin from DHS and the FBI warning local law enforcement that there are these forces out there who are looking at this as a potential opportunity.
People who espouse white supremacy really look for moments in time that they view as chaotic so that they can capitalize on that and push the country towards civil war.
And experts warn that there will inevitably be more violence.
This is a serious movement that should be taken seriously.
Tends to try to cover up those.
We have a problem in the country. It's getting worse. And perhaps we will have to endure another Oklahoma City or worse.
This is a real test. It's a wake-up call for our country. It's not just Russia, it's not just China, it's not just Iran.
White lives matter. You will not replace us.
The reality is our country can collapse not just from foreign adversaries. We can collapse from within. And Oklahoma City is a reminder of that fact.
Back in West Virginia, Kelvin Pierce's search for his father's National Alliance compound leads him to a muddy road off a rural highway.
This is it, the road leading to my dad's compound. It's obvious that there have been vehicles on this road recently, because you can still see tire tracks in the mud. I'm guessing there are people up here. My name is Kelvin Pierce.
Oh, how you doing?
I was Dr. Pierce's son.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could get permission to walk around?
Yeah, I could leave the camera in the truck.
Okay.
ABC producers were not allowed to film inside the compound, but Kelvin Pierce, on the ground for the first time since William Pierce died in 2002, took photos on his phone.
I got to see my dad's trailer where he lived and where he died, and, you know, just brought it all back.
And to Kelvin's surprise, the compound is no longer empty.
It sat derelict for years, but now they have people here and they're working on the property and they're kind of trying to bring it back to life.
The current leader of the National Alliance declined to be interviewed by ABC News, but said the group does not allow any illegal activity or violence from members, and in a statement said, "We in the National Alliance believe that our race is worth preserving. To accomplish that, we, as racial separatists, simply advocate geographic separation of the races by whatever means it takes. There can be no so-called white supremacy when we are not in the same space as non-whites." Kelvin spoke to Williams over the phone about his father and the future.
He said, you know, everybody thought we were down and out, but we're back. He said, we are definitely back.
For Kelvin Pierce, it has taken many years to come to terms with his upbringing.
I wasn't even able to talk about it probably well into my 30s. I was afraid to have anybody know who my father was.
Now 60 years old, Kelvin is married with 2 daughters. He works as a contractor and founded a relief organization that provides aid to orphanages in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. And after his father's death, Kelvin began what he calls his healing process.
Therapy, counseling, spiritual studies.
It's what led him to write a book reconciling his past, titled Sins of My Father, and to start telling his story to small groups.
I came close to being a lifelong racist. I remember the first time I told my story publicly, one of the things I said was about my fantasy about shooting black people in D.C. And when I watched a couple of black people walk into the audience before I gave my speech, I was like, oh no, I better not say this. But I decided to go ahead and say it, and it was remarkable to me that those black people came up to me and embraced me and said, through tears, that, wow, your story was so powerful and it really helped me. I was full of an accumulated rage that had been building and suppressed my whole life. There's hope that is engendered by a story like that, that if I could overcome that hatred and that depression and that feeling of unworthiness, that maybe somebody else could too.
People can change. One of the keys to that is really seeking to understand why people adopt a white supremacist belief or ideology and join a hate group.
We've got to be able to reach out to people who are angry and frustrated and who want to strike out. If we aren't doing that, if we're making some people feel like they can make it in this country and others not make it, then all we're doing is planting the seeds for future Timothy McVeighs to do the kinds of things we saw in Oklahoma City.
We need to move away from our hesitancy to talk about race and talk about our history. There's no shortcut around that, and everyone needs to be involved in that conversation.
I really do have hope that this is an evolution and that slowly as a species that we're evolving away from hate and toward love. But I see this as a pretty massive swing of the pendulum in the wrong direction. And I'm just very hopeful that soon that the pendulum is going to swing back in the other direction.
evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. If you are just joining our special coverage tonight, it is now 9 p.m. on the East Coast and 6 p.m. on the West Coast. Just 8 days before he is set to leave office, and after 4 years of steadfast support tonight, serious cracks are now emerging in the Republican Party's embrace of President Trump. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell believes the president committed impeachable offenses, and tonight the number 3 Republican in the House came out in favor of impeaching the president. Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney saying there has never been a greater betrayal by the President of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. The president is now back at the White House after an afternoon in Texas. As down the street, Congress lawmakers are starting the process of trying to remove him. You're taking a live look now at the House floor, where they're debating a bill that is, in essence, asks the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment. Tomorrow, the House will move forward with impeachment. And we do now know that, unlike last year, this will be a bipartisan impeachment, Cheney urging her caucus to vote their conscience. Kira Phillips joins us now from Washington again. Kira, you and I were talking earlier about just the extraordinary turn of events today. Is there a sense that more Republicans may now break ranks for tomorrow?
Well, just between the time that you and I initially talked, Lindsay, to right now, we saw a few more names come forward. You mentioned Liz Cheney, and we weren't really sure if she was going to support impeachment or not and vote for impeachment. And then she said she would and vote your conscience. And then along with her, Representative John Cato of New York, also Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger, also joining forces, saying the same thing as Cheney is saying. And now sources are telling me we could see more Republicans break rank with the president come tomorrow, possibly 10, even I'm hearing up to 20. But still, Lindsay, even with that said, that does send a powerful message about what Republicans think about their president right now in their party. But the vast majority of Republicans still said to oppose impeachment. So, you know, at this point, very much symbolic, this move. Where exactly it's going to go, not a lot of people having confidence that it will go completely forward.
And Kira, President Trump has still insisted that he hasn't done anything wrong, and he has not forcibly told his supporters to stay peaceful. What are your sources telling you tonight about the mood at the White House?
A couple things. They're worried. They are trying to just keep the peace. They're hoping that the president will not say anything else that could incite any type of violence. The phrase that one senior administration official said to me is they're just trying to land the plane. But you saw what he said today, Lindsay. It was, we talked about how it was sad. It was bothersome. Was it surprising? Not really. But the president, again, taking no responsibility, saying that his words were totally appropriate, saying that people, and we still don't know who those people are, said that his speech and the words that he said were totally appropriate. And that is concerning when you hear the president of the United States saying that after what we witnessed last week, what we heard him say in that speech, and not long after that, watching thousands of people, violent mobsters attack the U.S. Capitol.
And given that, you say that official said that they're just trying to land the plane, it seems first they ought to foam the runway. All right, Kira Phillips, our thanks to you.
Well said, Lindsay, well said.
And thanks, Kira, as always. And now let's bring in our senior Washington reporter, Devin Dwyer. The House set to vote tonight on a call for Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment, but the Vice President has already responded to that, rejecting it.
Yeah, he sure did just a few minutes ago, Lindsay. Meanwhile, these House members are continuing the debate on the floor. You can take a live look at this hour. They are continuing to prepare to move towards a vote on this. This is something we've never seen before. This is Democrats preparing to vote on a resolution to urge a Republican vice president to take power immediately. It's extraordinary to think about that, but this is an entirely non-binding, symbolic resolution. And tonight, Vice President Mike Pence made made clear he's not going to go along with this at all. In fact, take a look. He just sent a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying that while he was shocked and saddened by what happened in Washington last week, he did say this. He said, "I do not believe that such a course of action," meaning the 25th Amendment, "is in the best interest of our nation or consistent with the Constitution." He goes on to say that the 25th Amendment is not a means of punishment. Now is the time to heal. There you see the quote. So Mike Pence, Lindsay, making clear he will not move against President Trump, but also, notably in this letter, making no mention of impeachment and not defending the president's conduct as those rioters attacked the Capitol.
And I'm sure that was likely very intentional in doing so. And given the vice president is not going to act, explain how this starts the clock now for Democrats to bring forward their impeachment resolution.
Yeah, the much more consequential and historic move is tomorrow. This is the prelude to all of that. Remember, constitutionally, impeachment is the only way to remove and punish a sitting president for crimes or abuse of power. So that's what's going to happen tomorrow. Democrats have already teed this up. They've already published and released a single article of impeachment. It's called an incitement of insurrection article. It already has enough votes to pass. So at this time tomorrow, Lindsay, on your show, we will very likely have President Trump impeached for the second time. And as we were talking about at the top with Kira, the big question is going to be how many Republicans get behind it. At least 3 have come out publicly saying they will impeach the president of their party. And tonight, Lindsay, in addition to Kira's sources, I'm hearing from at least some White House aides that as many as 24, they expect as many as 24 Republicans to vote to condemn the president's conduct.
And Devin, before we let you go, just want to go back to that idea of Mike Pence, because in his statement, he also talked about how he wasn't willing to play political games. And just as much as last week, he felt that he was being asked by President Trump to do something that was not within his power, dictated by the Constitution. He was saying again that this was not something that he felt he had the power to do. And of course, the amendment, the 25th Amendment, has only been invoked 6 times in history, but never Section 4 that they were particularly trying to get him to do. Now, how unusual would this have been?
Oh, but this would have been historic. It's totally unprecedented. Remember, the 25th Amendment, which they're debating tonight in a largely symbolic and political vote, was passed in 1967 after the Kennedy assassination. It was really meant to address presidential incapacity, disability, medical concerns. In fact, Mike Pence in his letter quotes Nancy Pelosi saying those sorts of concerns, medical concerns, to be taken very seriously. You shouldn't invoke them when approaching a sitting president. Not really a way to go. So Mike Pence tonight making clear that wasn't the purpose of the 25th Amendment. He has a very good argument there, even though many troubled by President Trump's conduct, perhaps seeing reason to find him unfit or unable to carry out his duties. But all of this, like we've been saying, is simply, a pre-show, really, to tomorrow's historic moment. And at this time tomorrow, we expect President Trump will be impeached for the second time.
Devin Dwyer, our thanks to you. And let's bring in political director Rick Klein. He joins us now. Rick, we talked just a few hours ago, and we just heard from Kira as well. Up to 20 Republicans may back impeachment in the House tomorrow, but all eyes will then be on the Senate. Are there enough votes there to convict?
Well, in the Senate, presuming that the articles of impeachment get taken up after the Democrats take control, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans is the makeup of the new Senate. If all of the Democrats on board, which is not a foregone conclusion, you need 17 Republicans to cross over. Now, there's some that are kind of low-hanging fruit in this equation. Mitt Romney already voted to impeach the president. Lisa Murkowski thinks he should resign right now. But there's probably only half a dozen that are automatic. Then what gets interesting is if Mitch McConnell decides to vote for conviction of the president, because that is going to open the floodgates. And I think that would then free up, maybe a dozen other senators. That's where you can start to see that 67 number get met and exceeded. And people that I've talked to who know the Senate say that it's unlikely that you'll get really close without it going well over the top. No one wants to be number 67. So once you get to the range where you've got 17 Republicans, it's easier to see something more like 25 and make a more resounding point. It should be noted that all of this is going to almost certainly happen, Lindsay, after the president is out of office. So we all think about impeachment as an effort to remove someone from office. That's what I always assumed it was, frankly, as well. But in fact, there are other punishments that that could be meted out, including disqualification from future service. And so it may be more symbolic than not at this stage. In fact, it may even be politically useful for some Republicans to be able to say they're finally done with a clean break around Donald Trump. None of that is to say it's an automatic, but it is to say that it's quite a bit different when you're talking about a former president rather than the current one.
And Rick, if I can get you just to put on your historian hat for a moment, when we think about Nixon, who when he faced impeachment, he decided that he would resign instead. Why do you think that that's not an option for President Trump?
Yeah, people have talked a lot about a so-called Howard Baker moment when the Senate Republican leader at the time finally told Richard Nixon it was time to go. Senior statesmen like Barry Goldwater also part of that. There is no one that the president listens to on Capitol Hill that's like that. Lindsey Graham was on Air Force One today. He broke with the president last week. He's now back in his graces to some extent. But Mitch McConnell doesn't have any particular sway over Donald Trump. I just don't think that that person exists on the planet who can tell Donald Trump the gig is up and it's time to go, and that he would listen to that person. We've had our colleague, former Governor Chris Christie, an ABC News analyst, has been saying that he's been trying to get in touch with the president for more than a better part of the week, and he's been basically shut down. He has not been let back into that inner circle. So if you've got that kind of news for the president, he doesn't want to hear it, and ultimately it's going to be his decision. He still is the president for another 10 days.
And I'm just curious, a hypothetical now, if you would, Rick. If President Trump still had access to Twitter and could in real time respond to some of the Republicans who are coming out to support, do you think that we wouldn't see as much Republican support? And conversely, do you expect that more Republicans overnight and in the morning will come out and decide that it's time to kind of try to jump ship?
It's so interesting how our brains are kind of rewired by the Trump era. I have found myself refreshing Twitter, thinking that the president must by now have responded to Liz Cheney or to the reporting around Mitch McConnell, and forgetting for a moment that he's been banned from the platform along with Facebook and other social media. He doesn't have access to that. I actually don't think that Liz Cheney, Mitch McConnell, these Republicans are scared of the president's Twitter at this stage. Liz Cheney was called out on stage last Wednesday by the president himself. She's used to it. They get that. They have been concerned about his supporters, but the blowback will be there. These members of Congress, I think, they have faced things that are a lot more serious than tweet attacks from the president of the United States. They've had their physical safety threatened, many of them on the floor of the House and Senate. We've seen the airport confrontations with senators coming and going from their states, from their districts, having to contend with people that are angry, yelled at in public, yelled at on planes. That comes with the job right now, unfortunately, and the threats are much more real than Twitter. I do expect that the Cheney announcement, though, is going to free up some Republicans to vote their conscience, which may be kind of a silly phrase. You'd think members of Congress do that all the time, but in a case like this, it may be that they're looking for cover.
Rick Klein, thanks so much. Always appreciate your insight.
Sure thing.
Joining us now, California Representative Ted Lieu. First, thanks for coming on the show, Congressman. I'd like to get your reaction to the news that the number 3 Republican in the House, Liz Cheney, now supports the impeachment effort.
Thank you for your question. I am very pleased that Congresswoman Liz Cheney not only is supporting the impeachment effort, but issued a very strong statement, essentially saying that this is the worst betrayal of our country by any president. And I hope other Republicans read her statement and that they vote for impeachment tomorrow.
If the president is so dangerous that he must be removed from office as soon as possible, why even take tonight's vote and not just move right to impeachment, as it does not seem like the vice president is prepared? He said as much in a letter to Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to invoke the 25th Amendment.
That's a great question. My view is that impeachment is one of the gravest powers of Congress. It must always be our last option. And Speaker Pelosi rightfully so wanted to give Vice President Pence an opportunity to invoke the 25th Amendment or other cabinet members. And it's unfortunately looking like it won't happen, but we want to give Vice President Pence an opportunity. And if he doesn't change his mind, then tomorrow we will do the impeachment vote.
Are you concerned, or perhaps I should phrase the question as how concerned are you for your own safety and that of your fellow lawmakers over the next 8 days and beyond?
Last night, we had a briefing from multiple law enforcement professionals, and they're very aware of what happened on January 6th, and they're going to make sure that never happens again. They're also aware of the safety of members of Congress, so they've increased various aspects of security, such as our travel security and so on. I also want to note that Donald Trump could lower the temperature and stop all these threats right now if he simply says this election was not stolen, but he refuses to do that.
You think that his supporters would stand down immediately just to the power of him saying that?
Absolutely. If he came out and said, look, thousands of dead people did not vote. We didn't have these machines magically switch votes. And I was wrong when I said that a lot of voters who weren't registered voted. If he said all that, then I think his supporters would stand down, because then they will understand this election was, in fact, not stolen.
Do you think there's any chance that we would hear those words from the president?
If he's facing impeachment and conviction and removal from presidency, maybe he will say that.
Representative Ted Lieu, we thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Now to the latest from law enforcement officials working around the clock to try to track down those responsible for storming the Capitol. And tonight we've learned of a chilling warning that was received actually the day before the riot. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has those details.
The warning was stark. Tonight, ABC News learning the day before the riots, the FBI's Norfolk, Virginia office sent out an internal bulletin raising the specter of growing calls for violence. One online thread stating, "Be ready to fight. Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in, and go there ready for war. We get our president or we die." FBI officials said today the intelligence was raw, did not name specific individuals, and was shared with officials in D.C. Sources saying the mob had leadership with communications equipment and military expertise.
We're looking at significant felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy. People are going to be shocked with some of the egregious contact that happened within the Capitol.
The FBI also releasing new images of the person suspected of planting those 2 pipe bombs, showing a distinctive backpack and shoes. And a new detail, the bombs were equipped with timers. Law enforcement chasing down more than 100,000 leads, simultaneously racing to disrupt any plans for violence on Inauguration Day. Capitol Police telling House Democrats overnight they're preparing for more than 10,000 armed Trump supporters to descend on the Capitol for the inauguration. Some reportedly planning to form perimeters around the Capitol complex, the White House, and the Supreme Court, blocking anyone who doesn't support Trump, perhaps assassinating them.
They have published rules of engagement, meaning when you shoot and when you don't.
Today, officials arresting 45-year-old Louis Capriotti of Chicago, who allegedly threatened to kill members of Congress, in a voicemail saying, "We will surround the blank White House." Concerned lawmakers suggesting all members of Congress go through metal detectors at the inauguration. Law enforcement in all 50 state capitals preparing for demonstrations.
If there's any type of disorder, we will have the reinforcements there.
As the FBI tracks down hundreds of rioters. Aaron Mostofsky, seen at the riot holding a Capitol Police officer's shield, is the son of a New York City judge. He was arrested this morning. Jake Angeli is now in an Arizona jail, facing multiple charges. His mother says he initially refused to eat after turning himself in this weekend.
He gets very sick if he doesn't eat organic food, literally will get physically sick.
And many people outraged by those requests for organic food. Pierre Thomas joins us now. Just stunning details on the ongoing threat, Pierre. What are federal and local officials in Washington doing now to prepare for the potential for more protests and violence in the Capitol? And will there be further security changes to plans for the inauguration next Wednesday?
Lindsay, it's an extraordinary situation. We learned today from sources that they expect up to 10,000 armed individuals perhaps to come in and around the inauguration. So law enforcement officials are building layers upon layers of additional security. You're going to have 15,000 National Guard. You're going to have thousands of federal and local police at the ready. This is the most serious situation I can recall in recent memory in regards to an inauguration.
Just astounding. Pierre Thomas, thanks so much. And And now let's go to ABC News contributor Elsie Granderson. Elsie, thanks so much for being here tonight. Now, just today you tweeted, January 6th is the first terrorist attack on U.S. soil I can think of in which a large number of GOP elected officials are trying to replace never forget with let's move on. And we're certainly seeing more Republicans speak out against the president. At this point, is it enough? When will it be enough?
It's never going to be enough. We cannot begin to correct hundreds of years of systemic racism simply because one man has been escorted out of one house in this country. And that is how a lot of African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans feel right now. That this idea that once we get him out of office, we can go back to normal, as if normal was equal beforehand, is absolutely ridiculous. So no, it would not be enough. No, we would not reward those who are fleeing a sinking ship as if they're now heroes. No, we do not recognize the members of Congress who are now honoring our election or our democratic process. We're not doing any of that because we remember what happened in the days, in the weeks following the election.
Okay, we were going to go through the floor, but I think we're going to stick with you, Elsie. Want to get your response really quickly to something I saw online where black people were basically talking about the hypocrisy and the double standard, and a few people who I presume were not black responded back, not everything is a race war. Why are you always making this about race? Can you kind of educate people as far as why the belief that this impeachment and what we saw on January 6th, how this relates to racism in this country?
Sure. Let's start with this summer, shall we? The country discovered Juneteenth after the uprisings that were basically all over the globe. Juneteenth, a holiday that has been around literally for over 100+ years, but the country are all waking up now going, oh my God, Juneteenth, Juneteenth. Well, why do you think that is? Do you think that was an accident? Or do you believe you were purposely kept in the dark about this horrific period of racism in this country because those who are in charge, the publishers of the books, the educators, the ones who put together the curriculum, the teachers, the principals, the districts, superintendents, do you think there was a system in place to keep this vital piece of information away from you? Or do you just think it was an accident? Or better yet, Kyle Rittenhouse, who I believe right now is still running around free after being seen on camera shooting multiple people dead, right there on video, is running around free right now. Meanwhile, Breonna Taylor is dead, and the only person who has been charged is the person who didn't hit her with a bullet. I can go on and on about why you can continue to try to say this isn't about race and point to multiple examples, string them together like our legal system, like our criminal justice system. We know from statistics that a black person and a white person can commit the exact same crime, and the African American or person of color will receive a greater sentence than his or her white counterpart. We can look at education. We can look at healthcare, which is coming to focus during this pandemic. There are so many examples of how there is a racial disparity in this nation, that the idea that any white person feels comfortable saying, why do you make everything about race, when this entire nation was founded on white supremacy, is not only disingenuous, it is dangerous. It's dangerous because it allows things like January 6th to happen. When you don't teach people the truth, when they don't have the facts, when you lack courage and conviction to make the proper changes that need to be made to make this country whole again, you are going to have the January 6th attacks. You're going to have people saying, oh, what does this have to do about race? You're going to have this gap in knowledge. I've seen countless remarks on social media about people who are shocked. You know who weren't shocked? Black people. Because we've been telling you. The Jamel Hills have been telling you. The Fareed Sakar has been telling you. I have been writing and telling you for years. So you aren't shocked. You're just willfully ignorant.
Some people are shocked but not surprised. Elsie Granderson, thank you as always for breaking it down for us. We're going to now return live to the House floor where Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is speaking.
Determination to protect our democracy and the loyalty to our oath that have been so beautifully manifested in this dark past week. Mr. Speaker, a dark week it has been indeed. On Wednesday, the President of the United States incited a deadly insurrection against America that targeted the very heart of our democracy, this temple of democracy, the United States Capitol. Defiling the genius of the Constitution, separate but equal, attacking the first branch of government, trying to prevent us from ascertaining our constitutional duty to ascertain that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be President and Vice President of the United States. The gleeful desecration of the Capitol and the violence against Congress, our staff, and our workers are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history. 5 Americans have died following the violent attack. More than 50 police officers were seriously injured, including 15 officers who were hospitalized. On behalf of the House, I salute and express deepest gratitude to U.S. Capitol Police for the valor that they showed in protecting the lives of members, but especially protecting our staff and those who make Congress function. Mr. Speaker, this is a sad day for our country that we have to come to the floor in a way to defend the Constitution of the United States at this time. The facts are very clear. The President called for this seditious attack. For days, he urged supporters to come to Washington for the insurrection. Wednesday morning, he participated in a rally to encourage the rioters to march on the Capitol and fight. And not only did he urge people to march on the Capitol and fight, he further fanned the flames, and he and his family cheered and celebrated the desecration of the Capitol. Later that day, as the dangers escalated, he ignored and flat out rejected the pleas of Congress, including those of his own party, to call off his supporters, the rioters, the terrorists, as they engaged in vandalism and violence. Later that day, and now the President is saying that he is not responsible and that his incitement to violence was totally appropriate. The President's actions demonstrate his absolute inability to discharge the most basic and fundamental powers and duties of his office. Therefore, the President must be removed from office immediately. This is a decision we make with the utmost solemnity and prayerfulness, which this crisis requires. Removal of the President is an unprecedented action, but it is required because it is an unprecedented moment in history because the danger that he poses. And I heard the previous speaker say that we are objecting to the President because we don't like the way he executes his duties. No, we don't like it at all. Acts of sedition, incitement to insurrection, treasonous activity, and if you are associating yourself with that as the proper execution of the President's duties, you are associating yourself with sedition and treason. Yesterday, in a pro forma section, we introduced a unanimous consent request to take up Congressman Raskin's legislation, which calls on the Vice President to mobilize the Cabinet to activate the 25th Amendment to remove the President from office, again, to prevent him from causing more damage to our country. Who knows what he might do next? But House Republicans rejected this legislation, and so the President's unhinged, unstable, deranged acts of sedition may continue, endangering America and undermining our democracy. Now we are taking up this legislation in regular session. After passage, we are calling on the Vice President to respond within 24 hours of passage. This resolution gives House Republicans the clear choice to honor the oath of office, to defend our democracy, and to uphold the sacred trust given to us by the Constitution and by those whom we represent. Mr. Speaker, during the Trump presidency, this 4 years, and especially during this sad time, I recall the words of the great Israeli poet Ehud Manor, and that's what he said when he said, I can't keep silent in light of how my country has changed her face. Won't quit trying to remind her in her ears, I'll sing my cries until she opens her eyes. I can't keep silent of how my country's changed her face. I urge my Republican colleagues to open their eyes and to finally hold this president accountable. The security of our country and the future of our very democracy are at stake. When we pray for God to bless America, let us hope that that blessing comes down strongly on us in the next few days. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and again applaud the great leadership of Mr. Raskin.
The Speaker yields back. Does the gentleman from Maryland reserve?
I reserve, yes.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I will yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to House Resolution 21, calling on Vice President Pence to invoke Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Like all of us, I condemn in the strongest possible terms the violence that occurred here in our nation's capital last week. Political violence is never the answer, regardless of which side of the political spectrum it occurs. And that's a strongly held position on which I've been clear since well before my time in Congress. Let's be clear about a few things. The adoption of this political resolution would be divisive rather than unifying. The Vice President has said he has no intention of taking action under the amendment, so this process is pure political theater on the part of the majority. In addition, no due process has been provided. As a former prosecutor, if law enforcement brought evidence of a crime to me and said, take this to the jury tomorrow, for a jury trial, there would be no chance for the defendant to prepare any defense. I'd be violating half the Constitution, the Code of Virginia, over 100 different rules of procedure. In the more than 50 years since the 25th Amendment was ratified, Section 4 has never been invoked. As such, there are no judicial or authoritative opinions that would evaluate its implementation. And absent this, we must look to the legislative intent of the Congress that passed its language. And nowhere in the legislative intent is the current situation envisioned. It's meant to be used for incapacity, not for political ends with 8 days remaining in a president's term. Last week, Vice President Pence was lauded by the majority for not yielding to pressure to exert power beyond his constitutional authority to determine the outcome of the election. Yet, the majority today is attempting to pressure him to exert power beyond the intention of his constitutional role in Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. This action will only further fuel the political divide among our citizens and will be detrimental to the long-term efforts to unify our country. Mr. Speaker, both President Trump and President-elect Biden have called for a peaceful transition of power. I would encourage members of both parties to work toward this end and vote against this rushed, misguided, politically motivated resolution. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserve. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from
That
Maryland.
was Ben Klein from Virginia. The House continues to debate a vote on the 25th Amendment resolution, even though the Vice President has already said that he will not invoke the 25th Amendment. Joining us now is Maryland Democratic Representative Anthony Brown. Thank you so much for joining us on this busy evening. We've now learned that tomorrow will be a bipartisan impeachment effort. Liz Cheney, of course, coming out in favor of impeachment tonight, urging her colleagues to vote their conscience, was the way she put it. How many Republicans do you anticipate will actually join the Democrats tomorrow?
First of all, let me say that we welcome Liz Cheney and the other Republicans who will join us tomorrow in passing articles of impeachment, the second articles, the first president ever to be impeached twice by the House of Representatives. I don't know the clear number of how many will join. It may be 5 more, it may be 10 more, and it may be, static and, where it is today. But I think the important thing is that at least it represents there is bipartisan agreement that the president's conduct is impeachable. He incited a mob to riot. We have now seen over the last 6 days a stream of videos and photos that show the sheer violence, the danger, using the president's term, the carnage inflicted by this mob incited by the president. So if this isn't aiding and abetting an insurrection, if it's not inciting people to riot, I'm not sure what is. And if it is, and I believe that it truly is, that has to be an impeachable offense that would warrant removal.
And tell us, if you would, what we're watching exactly on the floor right now. Because if the vice president has already said, look, you guys want me to invoke the 25th Amendment, I'm not going to do that. Why continue? Is this procedural at this point? Is this to kind of air grievances, if you will, and get on the record with how you feel at this point? Why continue with this at this moment?
Yeah, look, I mean, the nature of the legislative process is that you should finish what you start. And they're often lengthy processes. This has now taken all day, a lot of it behind the scenes that the public has not seen. They saw the Rules Committee, which was televised. There are discussions back and forth, but it's not the practice of Congress. I was in the state legislature. It's not the practice of state legislatures to stop their activity when they think it's important simply because of intervening events that could change. I mean, is it likely that Vice President Pence will change his mind if we vote this out of the House floor today? No, but you don't know. And so we continue to work the important work, and we know we'll come back tomorrow, having completed this evening's or today's business. If Vice President Pence maintains his position that he will not invoke the 25th Amendment, we will move towards impeachment.
And why do you feel that impeachment is so important at this point? Is it about accountability primarily? Is it to make sure that he couldn't run for office again in the future, or have the after office perks, or is it all of the above?
I mean, in a sense, it's all the above. Look, President Trump is a clear and present danger. He occupies the most powerful position in the world. He has access to power, whether it's the nuclear arsenal, our military might, the credibility of the United States around the world, and the ability to motivate people here at home, like he did last week, to do violence. So it's very important that we demonstrate we will hold him accountable. We'll do everything we can do to restrain, if possible, remove him from office. So we're going to use every tool available to us.
The gentleman has an additional.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We appreciate your time tonight. Want to go back now live to the floor, Congressman from Arizona.
Purpose is now null. But I suggest to you, it would appear like, if we're going to proceed on, even after you've received the answer that you're seeking, and it's disapprobation of your idea, that the only thing that could be left is to pour gas on a fire. And I'm asking that cooler heads prevail here. This is not necessary. Don't let this get in the way. And just to parrot the last speaker, I'm asking friends across the aisle, don't do this thing.
The gentleman from Ohio, you reserve? The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman reasonably poses the question, why are we doing this? We think that the President of the United States constitutes a clear and present danger to the Republic and to our people. For example, on the white supremacist websites that helped to build the president's mob, they are now calling for a return engagement on the days of January 19th and 20. They are calling again for an attack on the Capitol, and they're calling again for the state legislatures now in 50 states to be surrounded. What will the attitude be of the President of the United States? Will he give them aid and comfort? Will he wink at them? Will he send them positive tweets and messages calling them patriots? Also on extreme right-wing websites, they are calling for the president to pardon the organizers of the armed, violent insurrection that took place in this body not even a week ago. And what if the president decides to pardon them? We know this president is not living up to the most minimal duties of his office. That's why we are doing this, to protect the public. And by the way, we're not telling the vice president what he must do. We have no authority to do that. We're telling him what he thinks he should do, and that the Congress will be with him, because we know that he has come under extreme right-wing pressure on everything from the counting of the electoral college votes to his positions on a whole range of things to go along with Donald Trump. So we are trying to counterbalance that attack on him from the right to say the people want to see a peaceful way through this. With that, I will recognize Ms. Jackson-Lee for 1 minute.
The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson-Lee, is recognized.
Accountability.
Sheila Jackson-Lee, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee from Texas.
Should come.
If we look at the Constitution, we will clearly see that Mr. Raskin's resolution fits the language, an inability to be able to discharge your duties, to exercise the laws carefully. Do you consider these words from the President of the United States to insurrectionists and terrorists to walk down to the Capitol, tells the President, telling them if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore? And that is the attack that the domestic terrorists made on this place. All we're asking the Vice President through this resolution is to reflect on that and to call upon the 25th Amendment to convene the cabinet to begin the healing, because the President of the United States is dangerous to the American people. That is why we're on the floor today. We hope that he will have an opportunity to reflect, because the Constitution says in many places that the actions of this president is dangerous. People have died. We have lost 2 police officers. Others are in the hospital. And yes, it was an insurrection. It is time to pass H.Res. 21. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland, do you reserve?
Yes.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Georgia.
Gentlelady from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to quote the President of the United States. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Go home with peace, with love, and in peace. Remember this day forever. President Donald Trump. I condemn this violence. Republicans have condemned this violence. President Trump has condemned this violence. But elected Democrats over the past year have promoted violence, have supported it. They fund it on their Act Blue fundraising platform, and there has been billions of damage caused over this past year in riots all over this country. You know how many companies have endured violence and destruction? I have 83 pages here of businesses that had property damage, were burned, and through the Minnesota riots. Our Vice President-elect Kamala Harris posted the Minnesota Freedom Fund bail link, encouraging people to donate money to bail criminals out of jail.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Ohio, do you reserve?
We reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Maryland.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to yield 2 minutes to Mr. Katko of New York.
Thank you, my colleague, for yielding. I rise as a proud American who has a distinct honor of serving in this great body. As a member of Congress, we take an oath to defend the Constitution because at times it needs defending. On January 6th, the nation watched as insurrectionists stormed the Capitol, threatening the safety of countless individuals and successfully, albeit temporarily, disrupting our process. In the midst of the attack, hundreds of Capitol police officers heroically upheld their duty to defend the United States and protect those who work here. Many officers were severely injured and beaten, including one of my former interns. And tragically, one officer, Officer Brian Sicknick, succumbed to the injuries he sustained. To Officer Sicknick's family, I extend my deepest condolences and know that we are praying for you. And to all Capitol Police officers, we are deeply thankful for your bravery. Because of you, thousands of lives were protected and the people's work was able to resume. Now, just as the Capitol Police protected us, Congress must match that courage and protect the Constitution, our democratic processes, and this nation. The President's role in this insurrection is undeniable, both on social media ahead of January 6th and in his speech that day. He deliberately promoted baseless theories, creating a combustible environment of misinformation and division. To allow the President of the United States to incite this attack without consequences is a direct threat to the future of this democracy. For this reason, I will vote to impeach this President tomorrow. The bill before us tonight is a non-binding resolution which requests the Vice President to invoke the 25th Amendment, a step he has already said he will not take. It is merely a symbolic gesture, and I will oppose that resolution. After last week's attack on the Capitol, it is clear our nation is more divided than ever in recent history. We began this great experiment over 240 years ago. And to preserve it, we must remember that our faith, race, or political party is not what unites us. What unites us is that we are Americans. I'd encourage members of this body and everyone at home to remember that simple truth. And with that, I yield back.
Back. The gentleman from Ohio, do you reserve?
No, I will yield.
Maryland reserves.
I will yield 2.5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop.
The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. 2 questions as we begin another 24 hours that will deepen the wounds of the country and the disaffection among Americans. First, will you stop at nothing? Second, is there any hypocrisy too far? Let's call this what it is, an ultimatum, an attempt to intimidate and bully Vice President Pence. They're not seeking just the same ends as Mr. McClintock, the gentleman from California, said. They employ the same means. They seek to bully the Vice President to abuse power under the 25th Amendment intended to provide for temporary or sudden incapacity of the President, while they claim to be scandalized about the President bullying the Vice President 1 week ago to abuse power under the 12th Amendment. With all due respect for the gentleman from Maryland, he has not answered, why are you doing this now? Tonight, the Vice President has clarified in a letter sent to all of us at 7:34 p.m. that this resolution has absolutely no other purpose. Here are 3 key things he said, and I quote, I urge you and every member of Congress to avoid actions that would further divide and inflame the passions of the moment. Work with us to lower the temperature and unite our country. Quote, as you know full well, the 25th Amendment was designed to address presidential incapacity or disability. Under our Constitution, the 25th Amendment is not a means of punishment or usurpation. Quote, and listen to this one carefully. Quote, last week, I did not yield to pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority, and I will not now yield to efforts in the House to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation. The Vice President has given you your answer before you ask the question. No legitimate purpose to this resolution remains. Your ultimatum does violence to a core feature of the architecture of the Constitution. The framers were emphatic about their purpose to avoid making the President a creature of Congress. The 25th Amendment was not ratified to change that, as you well know. Please do not pervert this important protection to undermine the Constitution. I yield back.
Members are reminded.
That was Congressman Dan Bishop of North Carolina, one of several Republicans calling to lower the temperature, asking for cooler heads to prevail. The debate on the House floor continues as far as a vote on the 25th Amendment resolution. We are joined now by former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman of Virginia. You tweeted today making the case for why impeachment is necessary, despite some Republicans saying that it's divisive and could lead to further violence from the president's supporters. Just outline for our viewers why you think that Congress should take that action in the coming days.
Well, thanks for having me. And, you know, what you're looking at right now is a scrimmage, by the way, and we could talk about that at a time because that's what's happening right now. But, yeah, when you talk about impeachment, a lot of people say it's divisive, and I would humbly submit that the divisiveness started with the stop the steal, the conspiracy theories, the disinformation, and the very fact that what happened, what you saw at the Capitol, was built on fantasy. Wasn't built on anything at all. And that's the issue that I've had, and I'm a former intelligence officer, and the reason I think impeachment is important is that if we allow people to incite this type of violence or to push disinformation, and we don't go for impeachment, it's just going to empower people in the future. So when you look at the cascading effects of this down the line, I can't imagine that we would just let this go. The divisiveness has already happened. People are already riled up, but there has to be accountability. And the reason that you do that is because the long-term effects of not having accountability could really hurt this great republic that we have.
For those Trump supporters who have fallen for conspiracy theories, why would the president being impeached change their views? And how concerned are you about the potential for escalating violence, given plans for further protests both in Washington and state capitals across the country?
Well, violence has already been there, and we're already seeing that chatter is out there now. And regardless of impeachment or not impeachment, the oxygen is already there for this fire to be lit when it comes to disinformation. And if we don't impeach, who's to say that that violence isn't sort of, I would say, almost appeased or said, hey, it's okay. Nothing's going to happen to you if this happens, and nothing's going to happen to any of our leaders if they spread this kind of disinformation in sort of this sort of plague way where they're using social media and the different channels almost to mainline that disinformation into people's frontal lobes. And that's the issue that I have with this. Impeachment isn't going to cause this. What's going to cause violence in this country if we don't have rule of law and if we allow this type of violence to go sort of, I would say, unpunished. And that's the issue that I have, and especially in the intelligence businesses. We think that disinformation is okay. We're saying it's okay, just go away in the corner. It's okay that 5 people are died. Again, I think that's a disservice to the Capitol Police. It's a disservice to the citizens of the United States. It's a disservice to the congressional members that were under attack. I think that's the issue that we have today.
Now, in your farewell address to Congress last month, you spoke out against disinformation, saying that it, quote, hinders our free exchange of ideas and creates super spreader digital viruses that create a fever of nonsense. So just how dangerous has this spread of disinformation become to our politics? And specifically, how much has it taken hold in the Republican Party?
Well, you know, that's the thing. I wouldn't be surprised if 20 to 30% of the people believe at this point that no matter what happens, the deep state has won or there's a deep state cabal. And I was just looking at a YouTube video because, you know, I'm also the chief strategist for the Network Contagion Research Institute, had 185,000 likes. It's a YouTube video of some pastor in the woods saying that there's going to be a new vice president to hold the line, that things were going to happen. The president was in a bunker, and that there was going to be a new government, and that government was going to be led by President Trump and maybe a new vice president like Mike Flynn. People believe this. That fever is still out there, and we have to have some type of facts-based inoculation using, I would say, facts-based analysis, using machine learning, using big data, but we have to have some compassion and love for these individuals. We got to know that a lot of this fever is already there, and this disinformation was directly pushed by leaders, people, or influencers, and also by President Trump. And, you know, a lot of people are talking about this one speech as the reason for impeachment. Well, let's go back when he retweeted that Vice President Joe Biden then, but President Joe Biden now, or President-elect Joe Biden, was responsible for the killing of SEAL Team 6. He retweeted that. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to stop right now. And that's why I think it's not just that one speech, but it's a cycle of behavior that you've seen with pressing Stop the Steal nonsense. People like Lynn Wood, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and all those people that President Trump sort of latched onto. This has been a very dangerous time in history, and disinformation could be the end of our republic.
Congressman Denver Riggleman, we thank you so much for your time tonight. And now let's bring in ABC News legal analyst and Cardozo Law Professor Kate Shaw. Kate, thanks so much, as always, for your time and for joining us tonight. Let's talk about the vote that's happening right now. Remind our viewers what the 25th Amendment is and what role it will have now, especially since Vice President Mike Pence has already said he's not going to do it.
Right. So at issue here is Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. It's actually never been invoked. But what it does is provide a mechanism for the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. And if they do that, they send a letter to Congress, and the vice president becomes the acting president. Now, as I said, this has never been used. It was likely designed, or it was almost certainly designed, to respond to situations in which a president is physically incapacitated but alive and can't actually, knowingly transfer power to the vice president. So this is a way to actually wrest power away from the president. But because the Constitution's language is broad and just says unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the argument being made is that the president, basically through his conduct over the course of the last week, maybe even before, but certainly on January 6th, demonstrated his inability to continue serving as president. Now, the vice president is in the driver's seat of the 25th Amendment, and based on his letter tonight, it's clear that he's not going to invoke it. So the vote being taken is clearly a symbolic vote. Even before the letter, it was a clearly symbolic vote because the House can't force the vice president to invoke this constitutional provision. But it's very clear now it's not going anywhere. And I presume that the reason that the vote is going to be taken anyway is simply to demonstrate that, impeachment is extraordinary. Impeaching a president twice is extraordinary and unprecedented. And I think the desire is probably to show that all other avenues have been exhausted before turning once again to impeachment.
What did you think of the vice president's explanation, basically saying, look, just in the same way that the president was asking me to do something that I don't have a power to do last week, I don't have a power to do what you are doing, what you're telling me you'd like me to do?
You know, look, I think the letter set forth a perfectly defensible view of what the 25th Amendment is about and what it is for. I think actually Section 4 is probably best read to be broader than his letter suggested, but it is certainly a fair reading of the amendment. And, you know, I'm not sure it's right to suggest that the kind of pressure campaigns are analogous, but it sets forth a principled position that the 25th Amendment simply doesn't give the vice president this kind of power. You know, but I thought the letter was pretty interesting in not taking any explicit position on impeachment. It encouraged members of Congress, just, you know, both parties, not to engage in conduct that would further inflame or divide the country. But if it said, you know, if the letter wanted to, it certainly could have said, and this pursuit of impeachment would do that. And it quite conspicuously didn't make that statement. So, you know, I'm not sure, you know, what the vice president meant to signal. Probably he meant to signal, you know, avoid the path of impeachment. He pledged to support the incoming administration. He referred to Biden as President-elect Joe Biden, you know, of course, which President Trump hasn't done in quite so many words. So I thought all of that was interesting. But the letter certainly sets forth a defensible legal case that the vice president just doesn't have the power that the House is suggesting that he should exercise here.
And then turning the page forward to impeachment, obviously we've never had a president impeached twice, so there's really no precedent for how quickly these proceedings could go. But what would happen next if the House does vote tomorrow to impeach?
Well, you know, then of course the action moves to the Senate. Right now the Senate is in recess and not scheduled to return until the day before inauguration. So I think there's a question about whether the Senate might return early. And in theory, it could hold a very quick trial. The president would have to have some kind of trial. He'd get to make arguments and be represented by counsel. But it could all happen very quickly if the Senate wanted it to happen quickly. You know, but of course time is very short between now and January 20th. And so it is certainly the case that only if the Senate comes back early could, you know, the trial actually wrap between now and the 20th, and much more likely that if there is any trial, it will be after the inauguration of Joe Biden.
Kate Shaw, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it. And let's now bring in ABC News contributor Barbara Comstock, a former Republican House member from Virginia. Thank you for your time tonight. The same question to you that I asked Kate. What did you make of Vice President Pence's letter tonight to Nancy Pelosi defying the calls or pressure, if you would, to invoke the 25th Amendment?
Well, you know, to hear Republicans talk about pressure, they don't like pressure, when the very reason we are here and had the incitement last Wednesday is because of the president's unseemly, unconstitutional pressure on the vice president, you know, and more stories breaking about sort of the unseemly sort of attacks that he was making on him personally and private, as well as what we saw on Wednesday and certainly in the weeks before. So the thing is, I think the president should be removed, whether it's from resignation or I certainly think he's not doing his job and not able to do it or capable. So the 25th Amendment can be employed. And that now, because he won't resign as he should, because he doesn't even have the dignity of a Richard Nixon, we have to employ impeachment. And I'm very proud of my Republican colleagues who have stepped up and done this. You know, they certainly don't like to be in a position where they're agreeing with, you know, Nancy Pelosi or other Democrats who usually they're in disagreement with. But I was proud of the strong statements that you just heard Congressman John Katko make from New York. He is a prosecutor who knows the law very well. He is a homeland security expert who has passed lots of legislation to keep this country safe. So he's appalled at that. And then, of course, like Liz Cheney, he's very concerned about our national security and having a president who really does put us in danger every minute more that he's there. So I'm proud to see the people who I think will be the long-term leaders of the Republican Party. And I'm now at Howard Baker's law firm. And if people remember back during the Nixon impeachment, Howard Baker was the one who had to make the tough choices. And he also ended up being the leader of the Republican Party for years to come in the Senate. And I think in very much the same way, you're going to see the Adam Kinzingers, the Ben Sasses, the Liz Cheneys and John Katkos and others who come forward and stand up at this difficult time. That will be rewarded because they're doing the right thing at what is a great personal and political cost. But they know, you know, I mean, Adam Kinzinger's, you know, fought in battle. You know, John Katko has been a prosecutor that's been under assault. Certainly the Cheney family has been attacked in the public square before. They're doing this because they care about what is an unprecedented action by this president that cannot be just left alone and go away. I mean, these political arsonists who've spent the past 2 months putting gasoline on the fires started by the president, now saying, hey, everybody, let's be kumbaya now. I don't have a lot of patience for that, because what this is about is personal accountability, but constitutional accountability, so this never happens again. And that we can still stand strong as the party of the rule of law, that blue lives matters, even though these people, killed a policeman in this melee, in this assault. And so I think you are going to see leaders emerge from this action, no matter what the outcome, on the Republican side, that we're all going to be very proud of.
Right. In the end, 2 police officers died as a result of that conflict. Barbara Comstock expecting more Republicans to follow suit. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Be sure to stay tuned for the Hulu ABC News documentary, 24 Hours Assault on the Capitol. That's coming up next right here on ABC News Live. Good night.